Welcome to episode 15 of the Coast AFL Podcast with Dick and Blaze. This week, we go through the beginnings of the bye rounds. Every game this week was actually pretty close, and it's very, very exciting for us because it means we have more to talk about. However, we're going to have a bit of fun talking about the Freo game a bit later on. But for now, we're going to jump straight into it. So, Mr. Cyrek, how are we
Yo,
doing?
yo. Yeah, I'm not too bad, not too bad. Pretty chill weekend. I was glad to watch a lot of the games because I was interested with and we'll talk about it a bit later, the mid-season rule change with on the ball. I wanted to get a large sample size, which, you
I think we
I
did,
don't really
actually.
have that much to do on weekends otherwise, but at least this is like a justified weekend. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
I think
it's for
I
science.
think the
For
start of the bye
science.
rounds was actually a good time to be able to implement a slight rule change.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, the teams that got the bye probably have a tiny bit more of an advantage seeing it played out. But um, we'll have a go. But overall, it was generally okay. Resulting in a bit faster played football. Players
Hmm.
adjusted very quickly. Always impressed at how quickly they can actually um, you know adjust to stuff like that. They're pretty good professionals. These AFL players.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah. Apart from that, pretty chill week. Nothing really much to report. How about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. It's been good to actually get a weekend. Considering my last
Yeah,
weekend was literally just airports and traveling,
exactly.
so it was good to actually get a proper sleep in and just relax. Um, Good to catch up on the footy itself, considering I haven't really done all that much of that. So I think it came back at a good time.
Yeah, yeah.
Got to see a decent Richmond game, even though we lost. It was
Yeah,
still pretty good.
exactly.
We'll talk about
You
that in a
missed the
bit.
worst of it for
I,
Richmond, yeah.
I don't know. We have a fifth ACL injury in the
Oh,
books.
I bet, yeah. We'll get back to that in a little bit, but yeah,
Shall we get started?
I think we should.
All right. I've got Thursday night's game. So no, you've got Thursday night's game
Yeah, I'll go
because
Thursday. It's Port and
the Port
Carlton.
Adelaide game.
Jeez, not letting you get in your grubby mitts on a 4 game lead, tell you that. But yeah, it was actually a really good game for me. I have a Carlton supporting friend. Just listen to the podcast, probably listen to this. Hello. Um, but yeah, so we watched it together, and overall, it was a pretty good contest that was just sort of blown out in the fourth quarter with great performances from Captain Cripps, and a good quarter by Blake Acres. They would slowly bring the arm wrestle of a contest, very much in Carlton's favour. But were never able to come back. And yeah, they were overall missing a bit of polish.
Mm-hmm.
As both teams will get like relatively equal chances. Both teams love getting the ball from stoppages and turnovers, but overall, Carlton's ball movement was a lot better the entire night. And the marking threats of their tall forward, Charlie Conroe, Mackay, and Williams,
Mm-hmm.
were too much for Port as they lost 10-11-71 to 16-11
An
107.
important note to
Um,
make in this game is that it was Carlton's first win at Adelaide Oval against an Adelaide side.
yeah, I was going to make that point a
Because,
bit
like, yeah,
later,
they've won
but
at
yeah,
AO
in terms
before,
of
but that's because of gather round.
yeah, and I think this was like a very much a statement win for Carlton because they've had one against good teams, but
Mm-hmm.
they've still sort of flown under the sort of threat radar. I think people have you know sort of gone a bit to the other way when they lost a couple of games. But honestly, like for them, just getting this big win away, and playing reasonably good football, getting some players back, will give them a lot of momentum heading into the back half of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and for most of the night, like this was a good pressure game. With as I said, both teams have defensive liabilities. Port let a lot of players go out the back, and they're not able to kill as many of the deeper entries that Carlton were able to produce. Um, and Carlton also, I think that one of the other things that separated this teams They had a lot better movement off halfback. Adam Sard returning, so big for them. Like last week and this week, it's his second game back and is already looking to provide a bit more spark that Carlton need in that area to
Yeah,
try and
I agree.
improve. Um, and yeah, as I said, despite Port having some good forward half pressure, um, you know, uh, yeah, as I said, they were just not quite generating as widely as Carlton were able to do. Talked about it already. Mackay Williams and Kerno, they were marking beasts. Mackay got 4 marks inside 50, Kerno 3. All 3 of those people that I just talked about kicked 3 goals as well. And yeah, it was a pretty bad night for Port's tall forwards.
Hmm.
It came from a lot of pressure, like there was a lot of inside 50s against them. And as I said, they were coming in deep. But, there was a bit of knock actually. And it's weird. Like, people are saying, oh, Asava Radicalia, like, he's not the puzzle piece and all that sort of stuff. But honestly, like, he was on Kerno. But when you look at the footage, the only goal that was, like, conceded from him, manned up against him, was a really good contested marking effort from Kerno. The other one was a contest where Alia and Zerk Thatcher were both sort of on him. No one managed to kill that contest.
Hmm.
And the other one was a free kick given against Alia. So when you look at it, like, of all the tall forwards, as I said, 3, 3, and 3, 8 of them, oh, sorry, 8? Yeah, 8 of them were probably more Alia and Zerk Thatcher. Again, I don't want to put it all on them. Like, there was a lot of failed pressure, a bit from the midfield, a
Hmm.
lot from their small forwards. But yeah, as I said, they just got a bit exposed. In terms of bad defensive matchups, Jones and Burton, they got sucked into contests a lot, and they left a lot of players loose at the back. It's been a problem all year for Port Adelaide, and when you got good pressure players, like Fogarty and Akers as well. Yeah, as I said, they looked a lot more potent than Port Adelaide were able to be. Um, yeah, and in terms of Port Adelaide, what was actually sort of a bit better than them was in the middle. Jason Horn-Francis had another beast of a game. 10 clearances, 10 score involvement, 6 tackles from 22 possessions. So I think it's been now 4 weeks in a row where he's probably been one of the best midfielders, while other players have been going a bit up and down. Um, Butters, he's generally been quite good. Got shot down by Chincotta
Hmm.
um, halfway through. And Chincotta obviously even got a goal. So it was like he had the hard shut down and he got a nice little reward for it. But yeah, on the other hand, as we said before, joining Cripps and Walsh being a beast in the midfield, Sander Koning, he's just so good.
He is.
8 clearances for him as well, 6 tackles, 8 score involvements, and I think was it last week I said Darcy Cameron around the ground,
Uh,
probably
yeah, it might have been.
one of the better players in the league. Um, Sam de Koning, I think in terms of that style of ruckman's probably like if you separated them all into categories in terms of like around the ground impact, direct tap, and direct scoring. I think Sam de Koning goes into
The around the
you know
ground.
really good in the middle, gets a lot of contested possessions, and is also a bit classier as well. It's defensive pressure, it's offensive pressure, and yeah, as I said, this
That's
game was
probably a benefit to
very
him
good for him.
being tall and skinny. Like he doesn't have so much weight on
Yeah,
him, where it's a struggle for him to go to ground or to get.
exactly. And the new ruck rules, of course, it makes it a bit easier. And we've seen it a lot. Like ruckmans are getting a lot of clearances because they're not just pushed out of contests a bit more.
Hmm.
And it's, creating a lot of good chains for teams that are able to convert. Obviously, there's a few ruckmen this doesn't favor as much. You know, Probably like Tim English, maybe. His impact's getting a bit lessened, but
I don't
For the
know.
most
He
part,
he had a pretty good game this week. I'm going to talk about him.
I did have a good game this week, but just in general, he's been missing a bit. And yeah, but yeah, as I said, and the other positive for Port Adelaide, Mitch Georgiadis, 5 marks inside 50, 4 goals, 1 for the night, and he made it hard for Mitch McGovern, who's as a defender's been pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as I said, there was just not much generated from Port's forward. A lot of scores were generated from midfield work and pressure. And yeah, up forward, I would say the only other player that had impact was Darcy Byrne-Jones, and even he had like 7 possessions. It was good effort, a few tackles inside 50, a few score involvements from those limited possessions, but it's still not much. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And
Yeah,
that
I get
was
you.
like better than you know some of the others, especially the toll. I'm talking about in a bit because I'm going to go a bit of a rant. Dixon, Finlayson, um, Marshall was okay, but as I said, he wasn't having that direct an impact. While for Carlton's back, which were very good, I've already mentioned Kemp and Newman rebuffed a lot of entries,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, as I said, they were just a lot better at generating chains off halfback. Um, and yeah, as I said, Carlton again continue to be very decent against the top teams
Mm-hmm.
that their schedule has produced. They haven't had, I think, the toughest schedule in football so far. And despite losing a few players in between them, they've dropped some games. I think they've gone through a patch where they dropped off a bit, found some holes. A bit in attack, a bit in chains from defense. But it looks at this very moment, the last 2 games, that they've been able to patch up a bit with that. As I said, getting Sard back, Fogarty back in their forward line.
Mm-hmm.
Things are looking up for them. So Port, on the other hand, if they were able to convert better from their stoppages, which they did generate a lot of scoring shots from, they might have been a bit more even. But it is a bit concerning just how much they rely on the stuff in the middle going right to affect the rest of their game. And I think this is a bit, and I don't like to go too much into selections, and I'd like to see your take on this. Um,
But
but in terms of, Port being a team that can lack class in areas. They're not very good at polishing off.
mm-hmm.
And this has been an issue all year. You've listened to me rant about it.
Yep.
Starting the game, it was Finlayson sub. It was fairly obvious what they were probably going to do. Like it was a planned sub off for Dixon,
Mm-hmm.
which eventually happened in the third quarter. Dixon didn't have much of an impact. For management, I'm assumed he was rest. But Finlayson was the person to sub him back in. And you've got to really wonder, was that the right thing to do? Because the obvious thing is, what happens if a player like Jackson Mead, for example, gets injured early on?
Or
We're
someone
left
like
with...
Butters, for example.
Oh, yeah, I mean, anyone from the midfield,
Yeah, anyone small and
classy...
fast.
Yeah, I was saying... Honestly, I said me because I don't like the thought of Butters going down.
Oh yeah, no one
But
likes
you know what
Butters
I
going
mean.
down. But yeah, I get you.
And, so in a team where the forward line have only really ever managed like one producer per game, like Dixon's had a few good games, Marshall and Georgie's had a good few games. I don't even think Finlayson's had a real standout game this year. He's definitely benefited from looking a lot better by just slotting some pretty low percentage goals,
Yeah.
which is still great. You love
Yeah, I mean
that,
that's what you
but
want out of a
you
forward is
know,
to kick goals.
but on the flip side, having him sub, we're putting in a player with his kicking efficiency under 50% for the year, and it really, and he didn't have much impact. He kicked that free goal from the boundary, but it really wasn't. And when you have Zach Thatcher, like the sub 2 games ago, like it was okay, but you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
you gotta ask, what are Port doing? You know what I
Well,
mean?
well, if you really
It's
want my point of view on where Port sits
yeah,
right now, is that you're right, they are missing a bit of class. But I honestly think that that stems a lot from Rosie. I think it stems a lot from the captain. I think he does a
Mm.
lot more for that midfield, like not just on field, but like just in
Oh
terms of
yeah,
his leadership and this
yeah. Missing
quality of
him
play that
hurts
he
a lot.
produces. Like, I think he's genuinely the missing piece because
Yeah,
from my perspective, I don't feel confident in tipping Port Adelaide unless they're playing a team that they're guaranteed to beat.
yeah,
Carlton was not
yeah,
one of
yeah.
those
No, that's for
teams.
sure. No, I was a bit not surprised, but
And
definitely.
it's not because they've looked bad at home. Like they've
No.
looked okay at home. It's just there are definitely some pieces that they are missing bad.
Yeah.
Rose being one of them.
Well, even against top teams, like Collingwood were the only team that really comprehensively, like that was the only bad quote unquote performance by Port, and you can
Yeah,
argue that was
like
mainly two
and you can
quarters.
and yeah, you can see against Carlton, they put up a pretty decent fight for the most of it.
Yeah, as I said, it's just concerning how much of that is generated purely in the midfield. You know what I mean? Like, if they don't have their midfield, it's sort of the opposite of Carlton. Like, they've got all of their attack coming from the forward line.
Hmm.
As I said, add Williams to the mix, it's a bit more diverse. But they don't have huge goal kicking mids. Cripps and Walsh will kick one every now and again.
They're pretty much your
Um,
main two, and
yeah,
occasionally Sard will creep
exactly.
up from halfback. But
Yeah, Kennedy tries, but he's not the best set shot. I like what he does, but as I said, in terms of finishing, it's not that great.
mm,
Um, but yeah, as I said, on the flip side though, as suspect as they are defensively, their pressure is still pretty good. But as I said, in terms of Port concede a lot from their halfback. So despite them mitigating a lot of the good clearance work for Carlton, as I said, it's just too easy. A bit like the problems I was highlighting before with the Bulldogs. It's just a bit easy to go coast to coast.
mhm.
Not literally. I mean, even then, technically, I think they're the highest team against from kick out, so it's technically true. 8 points per game, so not
Yeah, that
really.
sounds about
You
right.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's a sign, but it's not something to worry about. But um, yeah, as I said, it's just one of those things where they're gonna find something, and it's a bit disappointing to think that maybe, you know, I don't want to say they rested on their laurels defensively when they brought in all those tolls, and they were like, "Oh yeah, the defensive plan's going to be good," because we did know that Burton was pretty defensively in times last year. In fact, pretty bad overall, unfortunately. He's a bit hit or miss this year, but Lockie Jones is another one, but
hmm
yeah, it's just a bit upsetting that they haven't quite taken the step forward in terms of that. Remains um, a big doubt in their game, but at the same time, we've seen teams go through holes, we've seen teams come back from a bit, and it's still a lot of the season ago. So while it's not great signs, I think Porter's still a bit in fraud terms in the top four so far. And
well, they're not
especially
the
as a
only
Port fan, you
ones.
always gotta, yeah, like you gotta be hopeful. You know what I mean? Like I just hate the idea that your team like can never, and it's like I could do a deep dive on Port, and I must admit this might be a bit biased coming in, but like as a fan, you just want to believe a bit that your team can turn it around.
Why do
I
you
know it's
think
been a
I
long
tip
time.
Richmond so often so far this year?
Yeah, yeah, no, I know, but you know what I mean. So it's like you know, there's enough there for Port Adelaide, and at the end of the day, that's all you can really hope for. And even if it doesn't work out, it will lead development, hopefully, in the eventual handoff. But yeah, as I said, and as I said, props to come. Like as I said, I never really went off them. I thought that in terms of players, like they weren't quite getting the movement they wanted.
Mm.
And, now that they've got a bit back, you don't always want to pin it on that sort of stuff, but sometimes in a season that sort of happens. They're able to get their game back. Excellent work on the outside. Blake Acres. I'm not sure if I directly mentioned him.
You
He
did
was
at the
pretty
start.
fantastic. Yeah. So, yeah, no, as I said, it's in terms of overall midfield, it's pretty great. And if half back and half forward start to, come together a bit, again, I reckon they'll get back into top 4 contention.
They could genuinely become one of the few teams that might actually take it to Sydney at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Like, it's not the worst matchup ever for them. But yeah, as I said, that hasn't happened. Yeah, no, it did happen. Sydney comprehensively won. But, as I said, I think that was more in, if they can build, like, I wouldn't rule them out in the next matchup. I don't think they play them again.
No, off the top of my head, no.
Unless they get finals.
Finals might be the only chance.
So yeah, hopefully they might get a bit of revenge there. But yeah, still a long way. I could definitely imagine a first versus fourth being.
We've still got at least another 12 weeks to go.
Yeah. So
before anything exciting.
I'd probably leave it at that for that. But yeah, as I said, it was. As I said, I think it was more of a good game from Carlton than it was a bad game from Port. It's just these issues for Port never seem to go away, no matter whether like winning well or struggling. But yeah, we'll see what happens. As I said, they've had 10. They did have that 10 run last year, which
which was pretty insane for
similar.
them. Yeah,
it was pretty insane. But they had, as I said, they still had the defensive deficiencies, of last year. So it's not like they don't know how to win with it. But yeah, as I said, it's just concerning how much of it, as I said, is based off the midfield.
Just as a quick sort of interject, is that this year's Indigenous round jumper?
No, I don't know what it is actually. It's I think 2021.
Possibly.
One, yeah. I can't remember who had a hand in it, but honestly, I got a clearance because it's one of the best things about being an interstate.
Is it interstate merch? It's fairly cheap.
Yeah, it goes on clearance. I think I got it for like $25.
That's so good.
Yeah, so
I have 2 Indigenous round jumpers now.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the other one is that I have, but I have this year's, made by Morris Rowley Jr.
Nice.
It's currently sitting on my kitchen bench
fantastic.
because I haven't put it away yet.
Yeah. But no, I don't have a like huge jumper collection, but I do like to collect, and football probably have the most. Good for the podcast. I've cycled through them a lot.
I should probably start wearing them, I'll be honest, but I keep forgetting. All right, let's move on to Friday night's game. Collingwood versus the Western Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium, which is an interesting choice. I mean, contractual obligations for every Victorian team is why this was played at Marvel. But it was against the team that call Marvel Stadium their home.
Yeah,
which is kind of weird to me. So scoreline,
extra disadvantage for Collingwood. You hate to see.
No, I love to see it. So the scoreline was
that was a fake tear for the Spotify listeners coming down my eyes.
12-10, 82 to 15-10, 100, 3-goal difference. Collingwood were really, really strong for 3/4 of this game. It was very back and forth for a lot of it, but Collingwood had a lot of the control until
the start, especially.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They
could have had
up.
A lot bigger lead.
They should have had a lot bigger
Bulldogs
lead.
Were all over the place defensively.
But credit to the doggies, they tightened up, they steered the ship, and they put on a pretty spectacular haul in that final term to give them the win. Adam Treloar had, I know I've said this a couple of times so far this season, but he keeps having best games of his career with because he's looked incredible, especially against his old side.
Exactly.
So he finished with 37 disposals, 21 contested possessions, 9 inside 50s, 11 clearances, 9 score involvements, 687 meters gained, and a 1-1 scoreline. It's good to see him have an impact on the score as well as just tearing up the midfield.
And it's ridiculous. Like, he might not actually be the top 30 players of that game, but that was quite a performance.
Absolutely.
By him. Especially, I thought went like getting back in the clearances as well at the start. Trelaw was pretty instrumental in that.
Captain Marcus
Kind of crunch time.
Bontempelli had another captain's game.
Oof.
When he leads, the Bulldogs are unstoppable,
Yeah.
and his statistics alone kind of prove it. So he finished with 38 touches, 73.7% efficiency, 16 contested possessions, 10 clearances, 8 score involvements, 9 tackles, 2 goals, and 31 pressure acts. He
Mm.
was very much on ball majority of the time. He got to
Yeah.
push up forward, which is always good for him, especially when they're lacking some of the firepower with no Libba, because Libba's still been having
Yeah,
issues.
exactly.
So it's
It's very unsure whether he'll be back, but at the same time, they've just managed to find a good balance with the ridiculous, let's face it, stacked amount of players they've had.
yeah, especially against a
It's
strong team in
fabulous, but
Collingwood, like
you know,
putting up
yeah.
these sorts of numbers. Tim English, speaking of familiar, he had a really,
Mm.
really good game this week in the ruck. He finished with 12 touches at 100% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 7 marks overall, 4 clearances, 5 score involvements, and 50 hitouts, which beat out.
Yeah.
No,
Uh,
actually, he didn't beat Darcy Cameron. Darcy
Lost by
Cameron beat him
one.
by 1. But I think Tim English had more impact around the ground as well as in the
Yeah.
ruck and had a better game just overall. Um, it wouldn't be a Coast to Coast AFL podcast if we didn't mention Nick Dacos. We had a game a couple of weeks ago, me and Snap, where
Mm.
I know you listened to it, where we
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah, yeah. I
how
know.
many meters gained that Nick Dacos gained and then compared it to everyone else.
Yeah.
It was a fun game, just something different to do. But
Not
speaking
not the
of,
leading knight, but close.
yeah, I know
Mm.
he did a lot of hard running, which is his kind of normal role nowadays anyway. So he
Yeah.
finished with 32 touches, 27 contested possessions, which is insane. 8
Yeah,
inside
exactly.
50s, 16 clearances, which was the most of the game. I think
Yeah.
um, the closest was Trelaw with 11 off the top of my head.
Mm.
8 score involvements, 24 pressure acts, and 627 meters gained. And he also kicked 2 goals,
With
one.
with a tag on half the game too by
Mm.
young Harvey Gallagher. Um, Unfortunately for Gallagher, he, as Cripps, he might talk about a little later, started to really go off. He changed,
Hmm.
so it was a bit like um, can't really say that it was like too. It would have been like a very hard thing to mitigate either of those two nights.
Yeah,
But yeah,
there was a lot going on in that midfield this week.
yeah,
Speaking of Jack Crisp, I am talking about him next because he had a thrilling game as well. He finished with 24
mm,
touches, 9 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 6 inside 50s, 5 score involvements, 10 tackles, 40 pressure acts,
yep, I saw
515
that.
meters gained, and a 1-2 scoreline. So, like, yeah, the
Yeah,
midfielders might not have been hitting, might not have been hitting the scoreboard that effectively, but boy, were they
mm,
doing a lot of work.
yeah,
Especially when you've
exactly.
also
Like,
got like McCreary, who was also high in the tackles. Um,
mm,
but and then yeah, it was just all up to their forwards to try and have a bigger impact.
yeah, because it's not like it weren't generating from it. Like the stoppage, overall for the night were the exact same scoring shots. It was just mirrored 7-3 for the Bulldogs, 3-7 for Collingwood.
Mm.
So, as I said, you can't really put it on them. Like it was a fantastic midfield battle the entire night. It's just, and a bit rare for the Bulldogs. They were able to convert better. Um, you know,
Which is
it's
which is pretty interesting to say because both teams scored 10 behinds. It was literally just a goal line that was the
yeah,
difference.
yeah, exactly.
Just crazy
Um,
because it's not very often that you actually see um a score difference purely in goals because of just how inconsistent some teams are.
yeah. So as I said, it was just it was more opportunity difference. Once the Bulldogs were able to get their hands on it,
Mm.
like if you put the game in basic terms, it's very hard to gonna win. Going 64 inside against to 41, it's a 23 difference.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to have a lot go right. Even if Collingwood converted them more, there was no guarantee that it would have been enough.
Yeah, no,
But
because it's sometimes a reset in the middle is better for a team than a reset from behind.
yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, as I said, it was great pressure, but it was definitely like a lack of polish. It was just too many turnovers created by Collingwood as the game went on. Obviously, the pressure for both teams were insane.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, as I said, it's just very impressive by the Bulldogs overall. Um, they were able to get the game on their terms. Obviously, Collingwood hurt a lot with the players that they didn't have.
Yeah,
Like, I don't
they
really felt they ran out of steam, but you know what I mean? Like, it
you,
was
you could
more, as
you
I
could
said,
kind of compare this game to Richmond Geelong in a sense because
it was more like the ball use. Like, it got slightly worse as the game went
mm,
on, and there's a few people, like, I mean, obviously, the biggest one, Scott Pendlebury. Like, if you had him distributing, you think maybe they would hit up a few more targets when they did get their
they were missing.
possessions.
Were they missing both Elliot and Degoe? I can't remember.
Yeah, that as well. Pendlebury was out that match. I wasn't.
Yes, yes, he was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're correct on
So
that.
you know what I mean? Like, it's not like Collingwood's a team that's not used to having very limited possessions. But as I said, like as players start to run down, like the structure was there for them,
Mm-hmm.
just not quite enough against a team that was hot and firing in the Bulldogs, or at least after a quarter time, that is.
One thing I didn't notice when I was looking at statistics for that game is our main man, Mr. Billy Frampton, had a
Billy
had a bit of fun
Frampton.
in the rock.
Yeah, yeah. It was like I think it was mainly also forward support as well. Like he has been played more as a forward the last couple of weeks, which
I mean,
I
he's
mean
kind of
probably
become
isn't that great
Collingwood's
for him.
swingman at the moment because they're just kind of running out of players like we are.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, obviously he's playing the Nick Cox role. He's not quite Nick Cox, Mason
Mason
Cox.
Cox,
Yeah, Nick Cox. We might talk about a
different
bit
different
later.
team.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, so it is pinch hitting. Like it's not quite what he wants to do. And it did put a lot more on Cameron. So while Cameron wasn't as efficient as English, I can't really knock his effort.
No, I agree.
But yeah, it's not quite the setup that he would have wanted. But yeah, I think the other thing to note was how many of the young players played pretty well. Um, I talked to him a bit a couple of weeks ago. I like
Hmm.
Joel Freer off halfback for the Bulldogs. I think he's providing some pretty good run off there for him. Charlie Dean again.
Yep, I
I forgot
agree.
who he shut down. I think, yeah, that's right. He was on young Darcy, who he
Oh,
got
Sean
some
Darcy.
goals. Yeah, but again, he was like limited in possession. So, and again, it was a great game for him, but and a good like young people matchup.
Mm.
But you know what? It was like it was unfortunately tarred by the suspension, but as I
Oh,
said,
we'll touch on that
it
a
was
bit
a
later.
very good yeah, it was a very good game by him and what he was able to produce just in bits and pieces. Again, Harvey Gallagher, as I said, had the tag with roll, never got lost, got a bit of possession on his own, but in terms of mitigating impact, you know, pretty tough. I wouldn't want to be like tagging Dacos into Crips
Oh,
when they're
absolutely
both
not.
on fire. And, the fact that he didn't get absolutely towed up, I think he can hold his head high a bit. And again, Lockie Sullivan, um, a bit like the other week, did some really good things. Still finding his place in the midfield, but
Hmm.
getting involved. Um, Still can be a bit cleaner at times, but yeah. No, I said even with this period for Collingwood, they've got some players coming through that they can be like, we're not playing exactly who we want, but these are players that we want to invest time in.
Yeah, I can. Well, being a Richmond fan right now, I can completely understand that. Um,
Yeah.
Speaking of injury fronts, there are two injuries that came out of this
Mm.
game. Both of them for the doggies, unfortunately. James Harms with a hamstring injury, I don't know if it was an ACL. I didn't actually follow up on that. But
don't think so.
it did look pretty rough, but hopefully he's okay. And Latham Vandermeer also did a hammy. That one I also don't know about. I believe it might have just been like a twinge or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think they both should be okay. Probably just a couple weeks, maybe. Not too
Yeah,
bad.
exactly. And still, still impacts the dog's forward line of movement, but as I said, this game didn't seem to directly affect them too much.
All right. Shall we move on to the first Saturday game, being Hawthorn and Adelaide, or do we want to go over to the second Saturday game?
I mean, I guess I can take West Coast St Kilda just so it's not all you for a while.
I don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll go on. We'll go in order for now.
All right. So Hawthorn and Adelaide played at the MCG, Jack Gunston's 250th, which I actually didn't know this about Jack Gunston. I didn't know that he started as a Crow.
Oh yeah, that's a bit of an old people's fact. Something that I like to tell you youngsters when we're in the footy.
Yeah, it's something that I definitely did not know about. I've only known him as a Hawthorn player.
I think he did play a few games. I think less than 10.
He won.
Season.
I think he won their best. No, not best and fairest. He won something under them. Maybe best first year player or something like that.
Like I think it was Sandful. I think he won like a Sandful award.
I know it was definitely something related to the Crows before he left.
Collingwood had a pretty good forward line. Like when you can afford to let someone like Jack Gunston go, you know what I mean? But yeah, again, a bit of history there, but definitely Hawthorn won that trade. I would
absolutely. He's a premiership player? No. Yes? No, I can't remember.
Yeah. All three, I think.
No, yeah, you're right. I think. I can't remember. Anyway.
So good.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, his 250th game. Hawthorn came out of it really, really emphatically. I thought they were able to stand tall against the Crows. The scoreline was 16-11, 107 to 12-8, 80. And
not reflective of the game.
No, absolutely not.
Hawthorn a lot.
They showed, and they have been showing this past couple of weeks. They're showing us what we've been wanting to see out of them. They found the game plan that they want to play. They have the players in the right positions that what's his face, Sam Mitchell wants to play them in, and it's working for them. And maybe there are some like they can't really take it to a top 8 team. That's fine. Oh, Essendon, they could probably take it to. I'll be honest. Maybe Port Adelaide. I'm not going to lie to you.
Hang on.
But
we beat them.
True, but that was also when they were still finding themselves. But the point of this is that they look good.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And this is exactly what we want out of them. It's not, their premiership levels of good. They're still definitely working on some issues. But I think Sam Mitchell finally has something that he can work with.
And I think it's just a matter of finding enough in each lines. Because I have players, like, that will sort of drift in and out. Like, obviously, like, in their forward line, Cal Shadir is someone who is very raw. Is showing a bit, but just not quite there. Who else? I don't really want to like pinpoint them. Like maybe I don't know, maybe like a Connor Nash or something.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like they still have a ton of young players that they need to get game time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like if they're able to support those players while they grow, as I said, it's not going to be like they might not make other people's best 22. But they've got enough potential and they've got, enough experience in different lines. Obviously, I guess you'll rattle off a few players.
I will.
But, like players like Impey, Amon. I don't think Dylan Moores is that old, but he's having a really great season.
He is. Speaking of, I'm going to mention him now whilst we're right at it. Sure. So he finished with 27 touches at 77.8% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 12 score involvements, and 5 goals, which is what you want
Yeah.
from a mid forward.
Oh, it's
This is
more than
exactly
what
what you want from a mid forward.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and he's so smart. Like a lot of it was smart, either good positioning, like sort of finding the back out of the play, or just um, good forward work. So, he's a threat before it comes in, and is a threat while the ball's in the field of play in the forward line.
And
So,
it's like he doesn't even have to be the one to move the ball. He just has to get it to be able to have a huge
yeah,
impact.
no, I said he's had a fantastic. I probably should see some of his stats for the month because I feel like he's been one of the better, um, you know,
Absolutely. Like
form
Out of
players
their
in the
past 4
comp.
games, have they only lost 1, or have they won all 4?
Hmm. No, they lost the one to Port, but
That's right.
you seem to have forgotten that. Nah, it's nah, honestly, they were fantastic. I'm very unlucky to lose that one. You know, in terms of rebuilding teams, some as good as a win. Again, maybe if they dropped off after that, you wouldn't take so much away, but
But they've been able to keep at
the
it.
proof's there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And especially as we approach, the bye rounds, they're gonna really, really appreciate the break, I reckon.
Yeah, exactly. I think they've still got a couple of players to get back even. I'm not sure. I haven't seen
If
their
you want to
injury
take a
list
look
for
at
a
that
while.
whilst they keep going.
Yeah.
Jai
Pretty
Newcomb,
sure there's at least.
I thought had a really, really strong game as well. 26 disposals, 14 contested, 5 inside 50s, 9 clearances, 5 score involvements, 29 pressure acts, and 457 meters gained. James Sicily had a really good captain's game in defense. 21 touches, 76.2% efficiency, 8 intercepts, 9 marks overall, 4 inside 50s, and 528 meters gained. He actually managed to get up the ground quite a lot. And whilst he didn't pull off what he did the other week and score, played some forward time, he had huge impact, and that's what you want to see out of your captain, even if he does have some issues with the tribunal every now and then.
Yeah, it does get a bit like that. He's been better as he's gotten older.
He
He was a
has.
lot more of a hothead.
He
He's
definitely.
like a green.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Like
Restrained enough.
when they got into the leadership group and had this extra responsibility, it's like they've mellowed out and become a lot more mature in their roles.
Oh, definitely.
Which is always good to see. I'm going to touch on some players that I thought stood out for Adelaide this week. James Bourlace. I know we've talked about him every now and then whenever we've mentioned Adelaide, but I thought he had a really good game, despite despite the losing margin. I thought he was really effective in defense. He finished with 16 disposals at 87.5% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 9 intercept possessions, and 11 marks. I thought he won majority of his one-on-ones. I think he was playing third tall, I believe.
Yeah, so it's sort of like on Gunston, but not like as directly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's sort of that half breed where he's like trying to get into the game himself, but also provide enough contested effort into most contests.
Yeah, try and shut down your leading opponent.
Yeah.
And then Matt Crouch. Usually a standout player. Definitely a standout player this week.
I was gonna say it's a bit bittersweet mentioning him because I did see that he is out for a while.
Is he? I didn't.
Yeah. He's done his shoulder. He's going to be out for a month, I think.
Oh, I didn't see it in the injuries list, but maybe that might have been.
Yeah, no, he was wrapped up in tape afterwards.
Something I skipped.
Like it was something that was after the game, but.
Okay, that's probably why it wasn't reported.
But again, 2 weeks in a row, very brave performances because it was likely it was damaged. He's out for the season.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it's the AC joint, so it's likely he was playing with it.
So it's like the arm joint for an ACL. That's rough.
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, like the ball and socket joint in your knee is very similar to the one in your shoulder.
Yep.
The AC connects it.
But anyway, unlucky news for him. But he did have a really, really thrilling game. 35 touches, 12 contested possessions, 9 marks. 5 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 4 score involvements, and 7 tackles. He was a bull. And it's just
Yeah, especially
unfortunate that
when they
Adelaide are
couldn't.
losing him.
Yeah, and especially in a week where, as I said, I think they were definitely missing uh it was Rankin.
Hmm.
I mean, such a menial player to their team.
Are they still
Easily
missing
forgotten.
Phil Thorpe?
Yeah. He's coming. I think it's still after the bye.
Okay.
For him.
That's good at least. There's
Um,
some positive news. Silver
yeah.
linings.
As I said, it seems to be changing because, like, as much as their midfield has come together, this was a game where they definitely got outclassed overall. Um, Rory Laird hasn't quite had. As I said, as Dawson's gotten a bit better, Laird sort of dropped off a bit, so it seems to be
Like
like
they've definitely
changing places.
yeah, it seems like when one has a quiet game, the other has a good game.
Yeah. So, yeah, as I said, it's a big loss, but hopefully they can adjust a bit. They've already had to do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
unfortunately they'll need to
no
do it
Phil
again.
Thorpe.
But yeah,
They've also just lost Tex. He's done a back injury.
yeah.
Or at least he's had some back
So we'll
soreness.
see.
He was subbed out. Um
Yeah, we'll see how long. Like sometimes it's a week by week with backs. It's just how you pop up the next week. They don't normally. I mean, Tex Walker is probably playing in pain most games. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
just
well that's
how
what you
much of
get for
that
being
is
old. It's
manageable.
just how it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Um
Um,
but no,
so yeah, we'll see with
there
that.
once were some good positive signs for Adelaide this week. There are
Mm.
definitely some players that could hold their heads high. But for Hawthorn, it's just it's so good to see them actually perform. Especially after being
Exactly.
stuck on the bottom of the ladder for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
It's
Still avoiding the spoon, but you know what I mean. Like it's been a bit.
I think they finally hit that point where they're not going to go anywhere near it. At least,
Yeah.
like I think they're going to
Nah, for
be.
sure.
I think they're
And it's
finally set to be
cohesion.
like middle of the pack sort of team now.
Exactly. And it's, I mean, it's sort of, they're almost back at the point where they were, a few years ago where, like, they were threatening occasionally, but, as I said, obviously it's different. Like, it's the older people dropping off and the new people trying to adjust. Whereas, like, now the older people are like, or like the veterans from like the earlier period that they brought in are starting to really, um, you know, um, have that core game plan built against them
Hmm.
as they take the new kids under their wing. And again, if you didn't listen for the last few weeks, it's a very, it's a very good contested game. They can get the ball on the ground. They can now, well, they were before, they're getting beaten a lot, not getting possession, and the only possession they were trying to get were like fiddling around at halfback.
Hmm.
Whereas now they work hard to get the ball. They'll take their time with the ball. They'll plan a calculated attack. Um, but they're not hopeless when they don't have it. So,
No,
like a team like Essendon, possession's very good for them.
yeah, absolutely agreed. All right, do you want to keep going
Oh, yeah. We're going to the Eagles versus St Kilda.
over at Optus
And
Stadium?
over at Optus Stadium, a lot of people, tipping the West Coast Eagles to, they were very good at home.
I was one of them.
Uh, Yep. Got absolutely smashed. But as I said, really the way they went at home, been very good. Um, but yeah, St Kilda came into this sort of needing a win. Had a 3-game losing streak, getting very brutalized in the media. And to be fair, by me on the podcast, I'm not really
By both of us.
huge
They
on the
have
same.
they're probably the most
But
disappointing team this season because they have a healthy list. They
yeah,
just haven't performed.
exactly. But we're gonna be positive today, Blazy. We're
We are. We
gonna
are.
something for the Saints fans to enjoy. But yeah, at the start of the game though, it did look like business as usual. Saints did have a bit of possession. They were pretty good in the first few minutes, but they just weren't converting a lot.
Hmm.
The Eagles then started to dominate in clearances, and it was about maybe halfway through the first quarter to the end of the second, they would really start to charge away. They were led by Reed, Yo, Gibney, and Bailey Williams.
Hmm.
He seemed to be liking the ruck support. Sorry, loving the support in his ruck role. Um,
Yeah, that
yeah,
makes
so
more
he didn't
sense.
actually play as forward as much. It was weird because Flynn got a lot of the hit outs, but like Bailey Williams spent a lot more time in the centre bounces. So, it'll be interesting to see how that fleshes out
It was an
during
it was
the
an interesting rotation,
scope of the
especially
year.
with no Waterman.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, as I said, they were pretty well dominating, um, you know, in terms of that. Then at halftime, crucial change. Maybe Russ the Boss read the West, and it's like, hey, Harley is the best thing ever. What if we stopped him? And yeah,
Damn,
basically Windhager started tagging him,
what a
and
big
the
brain
shutdown was
moment.
immediate. Look, I mean, it's not as clear as that, and to be honest, it was more just the up and downness of the Eagles midfield.
Hmm.
Um, but combined with a fairly mediocre ball movement from the back half, they still struggle a lot in transition. The Eagles are definitely more of a forward half team when it comes to attack. The Saints are good at denying that, so once they stopped the clearances, the well sort of dried up for them. Um, Whereas, as I said, from the back half, the Saints themselves actually, again, like other games, they started to get good ball movement later, with Mason Wood having a very standout game,
Hmm.
Wangani Malira, very damaging, and Jack Sinclair, he sort of went from the inside midfield, where, again, they were sort of beaten, and moved back on halfback, and he just looked a bit more at home.
He's
Um,
definitely much more
Obviously, he's
comfortable as off halfback.
yeah, it's sort of hard because he wins a lot of the tough ball for the Saints, but when you're not doing that much with it, you sort of wonder why, you know. Because as I said, is it worth it, winning the clearances and not doing much when you could provide a bit off halfback? But, there's a bit of tinkering. He's had a very up and down year.
Hmm. Yes.
What made it more impressive with the Saints too, they had to do it without King. When they had that deficit, he was subbed off after his 2 goals in the third quarter
Hmm.
due to an awkward knee injury, not an ACL, as far as we
Thankfully.
know. Yeah. Um, but again, someone we mentioned earlier, Mason Wood went from the wing to the forward line and produced 3 goals in the last quarter. Uh, and despite an effort from Liam Ryan to try and keep them back into the game, he's cooked 3 goals too, I think, overall.
Hmm.
Yeah, the Eagles would lose at Optus 10-8, 68 to 12-10, 82, as they weren't in it for a long period of that second half. Like
Yeah, I agree.
it was very much a big switch. And you talked about before, with the tipping, Waterman being laid out, it you don't want to say he would have kicked like 10 goals and won the game for the
I
Eagles,
mean,
but they
there is a
definitely
fair
missed
chance he
him.
probably would have.
Wilkie's a pretty good defender.
That's true.
Like, it wouldn't have been easy, but again, he's also kicked bags against teams with good, like Melbourne. He kicked 5 against, so
Yeah,
or was it 4? I
but
can't
they
remember.
had. I think
It
they
was
still
3.
had Lever in then. So yeah, kicking five against Lever
Yeah,
is pretty rough.
yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, oh, and in the derby too, against Pearson.
Yeah,
It was- yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so Wilkie actually really appreciated it. He took 7 intercept marks, along with Battle and Howard. Howard, had a pretty bad game last week, turned around a lot. Yeah, it was actually interesting seeing the scoring shots. They kept the Eagles to one side of the ground, and they only managed 2 set shots within a 30-degree angle to goal. So it was also a very wide attack.
hmm.
Both of those goals were from around 40 meters out. So yeah, they really denied the Eagles a lot. They limited them to 8 inside marks inside 50 overall. Cripps would enjoy 3 goals. Ryan 3 goals too. Both would have 3 other scoring involvements that weren't their own set shots. But yeah, they lacked a lot of forward pressure really. Like it, as I said, it's not just the fact that Waterman was out. There's just they had no real contain. If it wasn't a direct shot, it was rebounded. And after the second half, there would be no goals added from the midfield unit. So they were really just, relying on those entries to come good. And if not, it was just an
And
easy rebound on the other.
yeah, there just wasn't
Um,
much more that they could do once the midfield got shut down.
yeah. And on the flip side, Saints, terrific forward half pressure. So Mason Wood not only scored 3 goals, 4 goals and had 3 marks, inside 50, I should say.
Hmm.
But his 6 tackles inside 50 almost equaled the total Eagles for the night. The total of the Eagles for the night, as the Saints won tackles inside 50 count 7-17.
Hmm. Interesting.
Henry and Hill would have a lot of forward distribution, a lot of pressure. On that sort of like Henry was more of the forward, and it's been a bit of an awkward position for him, but it's his best night playing that role for them. Hill would be sort of all over the ground on the wing,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it was a lot more balanced attack from the Eagles. For the Eagles themselves, Barras had a decent match night out. He matched Wilkie's 7 intercept marks, but it was just a lot of work cut out for him. Like the Eagles weren't defending very well, and that sort of caught up with him. Again, like like last year, how it was like Oscar Allen, like looking fantastic in a pretty dismal forward line for the Eagles.
I mean, Waterman kind of
It-
started doing the same thing.
yeah, I know that, but like this year's been like sort of the opposite. It's like Barras has like always been a shining light, despite the Eagles midfield sort of letting them down. Like I saw the point I want to say, as I said,
Is that
the
their
Eagles
forward line's
midfield
gotten
couldn't
better?
get entries inside forward 50 last year. This year, they fixed that up. Still conceding a lot the other way. But McGovern and the Eagles defense really has sort of at least tried their best.
Mm.
And, there was a few others that did okay sort of games for them. You know, not Cripps off halfback. Who am I thinking of?
Yeah,
Duggan.
yeah, that's right.
Duggan off halfback was okay. Hoff had his moments. But as I said, it was just overwhelmed by St Kilda's forward attack. It's a bit embarrassing, kind of, for a team not known for it. But, good on them for finishing off. The run-off halfback, again, bringing in Miller, 24 possessions, 618 metres gained, 6 marks, 5 intercepts, 4 score involvements.
It's very big for a young player.
Yeah, exactly. So, is a bit of the form that he showed a lot last year. He's been mainly good this year as well. So, good pressure, good distribution from him. But, the real lift, again, as well as talking about the inside midfield after halftime, the Saints out-tackled the Eagles overall, 84-65. And a lot of that was produced from the midfield unit.
Mm-hmm.
Steele led the night with a record of both 15 tackles and 36 pressure acts. Clark got 12 and Winghager got 8 in terms of tackles.
Yep.
And 8 was actually the highest that the Eagles ended up getting. I think that was Gibney. He also had a pretty okay game for the Eagles.
Yep, sounds about right.
Dow, although he got comprehensively beaten by Reed in the first half, he lifted in the second. Pretty good game from him. 22 possessions, 12 contested, and a night high 9 clearances. Rowan Marshall would also have a good clearance game with 8. And although he was very up and down in terms of his overall impact, 6 free kicks against sort of hurt, and he got beaten early. So, it was sort of without a dominant game by Rowan Marshall. You know what I mean? Like, some of his stat work was good, but it wasn't, just him feasting on like a poor effort. You know what I mean? Like, the Eagles ruckman held their own. And as I said, the Eagles midfield weren't like terrible. It was just the inconsistency. I would actually say that Gibney was the most consistent for the entire night. 20 possessions, 12 contested, 80% efficiency, 6 clearances, 8 tackles, and he was just always providing something in each quarter. Meanwhile, Sheed, Yo, and Reed had mammoth quarters in the second, but very mixed in everything else. Young Reed, very frustrated, finishing the game. Obviously, sling tackled Darcy Wilson into the turf, finds himself suspended into 2 games. We'll go a bit more into that later. And gave away a 50-metre penalty on a very sort of tough call in the late marking contest. And that would sort of seal the game for the Saints. I think he had 2 50-metre penalties the entire night. So,
possibly.
Yeah, a bit of frustration. I think one was a marking infringement going into the mark. So, wasn't a perfect win for the Saints, but very much needed. And as I said, their forward structure looked a lot better than in recent times. If you were to nitpick, maybe they could be a bit better, turning their center clearance in dominance into score at times. But overall, just the improvement, getting hands on the ball, getting the clearances back, and not just being a defensively good clearance team, but winning the ball yourself was very good for them. Eagles will obviously need to readjust to get back into their form that they had not too long ago. Harley Reid also, again, out for maybe 2 weeks. But they did have a good week in the waffle. I don't normally talk about it, but it was sort of a rare win for them over Perth. Eagles waffle team, notoriously pretty bad, get spanked most week. But the new kid, mid-round draft pick, Jake Hutchinson, 5 goals for them in the reserve side. So Clay Hall, Jai Cully also got 30 possessions, so they might be in a bit of a mix. So, they might approach this as sort of a soft reset, Hopefully they'll get Waterman back. Maybe they'll look at swapping out maybe a Marich for Hutchinson, give Marich a week to find some confidence. Presented okay, but didn't really have that much impact overall.
Yeah.
And, just keep things fresh. They got another home game against the Kangaroos. So, it's a good chance for them to get into some form. But yeah, as I said, in terms of the Saints, much needed. That's, as I said, you can't really say too much because the Eagles weren't fantastic, but they had a job that they needed to do.
Yeah, and they got it done.
A gimme win. Not too many people tipped the Saints, and they did it. So
I didn't tip the Saints,
them.
So there you go.
Yeah. But yeah, as I said, yeah, I think one of the best things going forward for them is that consistency in terms of moving from the back half, moving in the outside, because they can do it well. Even someone like Brad Hill was sort of okay this match. Wasn't the star, but is often contributing. So just clean it up a little bit. Mix some of the longer kicks, which they've been doing with some more good handball chains, that sort of stuff, and they can start to just be more than a pressure team that can't convert. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's sort of the label put on them this season.
I still stand by the fact that they're probably the most disappointing team of the season so far. But if they're able to go into the second half of the season with some more confidence, with some of their issues fixed or at least tightened up,
you can see where things could improve for them.
Yeah.
You don't want to say it will because, again, one team. But, as I said, you got to be hopeful because, as I said, they've been a bit, I don't want to say clowned on in the media, but, it's definitely... It's weird because it seems worse when you look at the actual scoreboards, but the actual performances they've put on, as I said, it just hasn't seemed to be getting the job done. This is a window. They've got to capitalize on it. Otherwise, it's just going to be a very dour year for the Saints.
If they're able to at least try and carry a bit of momentum coming out of this game, they'll definitely start looking a little bit better, hopefully.
And, as I said, they've got an interesting matchup against the Gold Coast. We'll go into that a bit more, but it's definitely a game that they could win. Gold Coast obviously being away home that game. But again, we'll talk about that a bit later. Do you want to talk about... we're at the Goomba, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We are down at Shoebox Stadium in Geelong.
Yes.
Where the first time since 2017, Richmond played a game down there. The last time Richmond played Geelong in Geelong, we got spanked by Reece Stanley. No, Reece Stanley? Someone told. I can't remember. No, it wasn't Hawkins. It was one of their older players who's now retired.
Blitzer?
No, it's retired player.
Oh, retired.
Yeah, was actually looking at it the other day, and now I can't remember who it was. Anyway,
that's always the case.
Point is, last time we went down there, we got spanked, but it was the last loss that we had before we went on to win the premiership that year, which is something I'm not ever gonna, let Geelong people forget. Well, the interesting thing about the constant matchups between Richmond and Geelong is that when the pressure was on, we always kind of knew how to match up well against them. For example, final series, a really good example of this. I know people are probably sick of me talking about this, but 2017, beat them in the qualifier. 2019, beat them in the prelim. 2020, beat them in the grand final. So like when the pressure was on, we knew how to cover their bases.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Geelong
this year there
unfortunately
isn't
had that
really
record against a few teams, but
this year
yeah.
there isn't really all that much pressure on us because you look at our injury list. Like we're playing young players. Almost half of our team are less than 50 games. Actually, I think
Yeah,
more
I
than half
assume
of our
you'll
team are
probably
less than
repeat
50
the
games.
stat that's been said about how far down the list they've gone, how
Um,
many players they've used.
yeah. From the top, off the top of my head, out of our current available players, there are only 4 that we have not played yet.
And 3 of those were mid-round draft
2 of
picks.
them are mid-round draft picks.
2 of them. One of them's the project one, the basketballer.
Yes, no,
I don't think
he
the
was a
other one
Category
is.
B rookie at the start of the year,
Yeah,
and then we have the 2 players we just picked up who actually looked really good in the VFL this week, surprisingly.
Mhm.
Because they played straight away, they looked already pretty
yeah,
much fit and ready to go. They just need to learn the game plan.
yeah, exactly.
And then there's probably one more. I know we have 2 players out with back injuries. Um, so that's not something we could really do. But I think there was one more
Yeah,
player off the top of my head that we could play, but we haven't played yet. Anyway,
it's a lot.
Geelong versus Richmond in Geelong. Um, Again, we're a young Richmond team. Like everyone kind of knows it at this point because of the injuries, and we put it up to them. We for the
Yeah,
at least the first 3 quarters, we took it to them, made it really close. We had a lead for a
yeah.
lot of it. But
I
yeah,
think
fourth
at the
quarter
start there's been a lot of
we just ran out of
yeah.
legs, and put Geelong back on the winners list after a 4-game losing streak.
Yeah, and not only that, they were at the legitimate threat for losing 3 in a row at Goomba.
Mm.
But as I said, obviously credit to them patching things up. But it was very,
Yeah, they managed to steady the ship when they needed to.
yeah. I don't want to say like it was. I don't want to say it's like Pyrrhic for them, because obviously it was. They, yeah. It's
It's
just one of those things where they unconvincingly patched themselves up but still managed, to do that well
Yeah,
enough.
like it wasn't.
It is,
It might have been a 30-point ball game at the end of the day,
yeah,
but it wasn't all that convincing considering how tough it was in the first 3 quarters.
yeah, exactly. And I think they'll go out of it, like they can't rely on a team just literally running out of juice.
Mm.
Again, like as we said, it wasn't due to effort, it wasn't due to like players not running as much or whatever. It was just, the disposal, just started getting worse and worse and worse.
Hmm.
Obviously, when you're tired, it is harder to dispose of the ball. So, you can try as much as you like. It's just going to catch up to you at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's just the nature of the
Um,
game.
yeah, exactly.
So
But, as I said, Richmond, again,
the
another performance where they're able
I'm
to
very happy with what I
generate.
saw at the very least.
Yeah. And they took up to a good team. They generate a lot of intercepts themselves,
Hmm.
especially in the forward half.
Uh,
Um, and honestly, if some of those intercepts were going to a fully fleshed out forward line, and I know you're going to talk about a bit of a pain that you've lost another person
to an
in a
ACL,
minute.
yeah, I'm gonna touch on that.
Yeah. But if you were, I mean, even Lynch, you know what I mean? Like, he
Ugh,
might have taken some deeper entries
we
if,
are badly
know,
missing. We've been missing Lynch all year.
yeah. Like, as I said, you get more shots out of the goal square. Like, they were 7-7 in terms of turnover scoring.
Hmm.
But you felt like they could have gotten a bit more out of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
again, not necessarily their fault.
No, it's kind of
But,
just
as I
how it
said,
kind of is at the
just how
moment.
the dice are rolling for Richmond at the moment.
Yeah, we kind of
Um,
just take this year as a year to play the kids, to see who's up to the challenge, who isn't,
yeah.
and develop our list from there.
But yeah, it makes me excited to see Richmond next year, though. Like, for a bad year, like, hopefully it doesn't result in too much of a drop in memberships. I
It's
know
a
Tigers fans are pretty loyal. Like,
yeah,
for the lean
it's
years,
a
they're,
bad year in terms of how it reflects on the ladder,
yeah.
but I think there's definitely silver linings, and that's getting game time into the younger players, which is
Oh, yeah.
Very, very important, and it's exactly what Collingwood's doing at the moment, except they're winning more games than we are. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm gonna run through
Um.
the list of a couple of players that stood out to me. Ollie Dempsey, I thought was really, really good for Geelong this week. 27 touches at 70.4% efficiency, 13 contested possessions, 5 marks, 3 clearances, 5 score involvements, 12 pressure acts, and 3 goals. He had a really strong, um,
And
really
it
strong
was a good
game.
switch for him because early on he was actually, I don't want to say beaten by Ralph Smith, but Ralph Smith was definitely working.
I love Hugo.
Or the stuff he was able to do was a bit better than what Ollie was able to do. Match up on the wing. They've moved a few players around, and then he just goes forward, takes his moments.
I'm a big Hugo fan, but I think
Yeah.
towards the end of the day, I think Ollie ended up having his number.
Oh, well, Ollie switched forward.
Yeah.
So, as I said, he wasn't directly, but you know what I mean. You
Yeah.
sort of play a bit floating in that position anyway. It's not pure forward, half forward. It's not pure wing.
No, it's kind of a mix of both.
Yeah.
It's something that someone like Marlon Pickett, for example, is able to do. Like, he might be an older player, but he's usually on the wing and he can play forward. He can play deep forward, actually.
Or even someone we mentioned earlier, Liam Ryan, you know.
Yeah, for example. Jack Bowes, I think, was best on ground for the Cats. He had finished with 29 touches, 14 contested possessions, 4 marks, 11 inside 50s, 9 clearances, 3 score involvement. Or actually, I definitely wrote a different number there because I have 3 score involvements and 5 score involvements. It might have been 3 score assists or goal assists. Sorry, something like that. One of them was a goal assist. Jack Bowes. One's definitely a goal assist. The other is score involvements. Anyway, 8 tackles, 23 pressure acts, a 1-2 score line, and 636 meters gained throughout the middle. I also think Tom Atkins had a really, really good game, even though he's certainly getting much older. You know.
So I just quickly interject. Jack Bowes, 2 goal assists, 5 score involvements.
Thank you. I knew one of them was a goal assist.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom Atkins, I thought, had a really, really good game. He looks younger despite his age in his performance. Finished with 27 touches, 15 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 10 clearances, 5 score involvements, 11 tackles, 29 pressure acts, and 392 meters gained. Again,
I will say Tom Atkins isn't actually that
he's not
old.
super old, older, but it's
weird because he's still a veteran. Like, he's 28.
Yeah, he is.
But he's someone that I just, like, convinced is 33. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, he's been in the league 10 years.
Yeah, so if anyone's confused like me, yeah, he's 28, but he's still oldish.
Yeah, he's starting to push into his twilight years, but he's not very late into them yet. For Richmond, Liam Baker, you can't say much more about him. He's just a legend. We need to throw the bag at him. Like, with, you know, we have Money in the Bank from Freewalt retiring, from Cochin retiring, Dusty will retire this year. We'll probably lose. We'll probably delist a couple of players. I'll be honest. We'll do some trades. Like, I think we'll probably lose Jack Graham. But if we can keep Baker, just give him whatever he wants, please.
He's someone you can build around. So versatile.
Exactly.
Just that effort week in, week out.
Bolter might be our tall swingman, but Baker is our small swingman.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. So Baker finished with 31 touches, 15 contested possessions, 5 clearances, 5 score involvements, 6 tackles, 37 pressure acts, and 344 meters gained. I think Nank had a really, really strong game in the middle. Finished with 17 touches at 70.6% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 7 marks, 51 hitouts, which was double the hitouts of Toby Conway. Granted, he is a young ruck, because normally that's not the ruck that you match up with when you play against Geelong. But, you know, you take it. You do, if you're able to have a dominant performance in the ruck, you definitely make the most. Yeah, exactly right. 4 score involvements, 6 tackles, and 17 pressure acts. Overall, again, as I kind of said before, I'm very happy with what I saw in the first three quarters of the game. Granted, towards the end of the third quarter is where we started to slip, but that's okay. Again, young
Yeah.
side, it's going to happen. And
And
yeah, I'm
let's.
pretty
I
happy with it.
think a bit of credit has to go to Geelong. As I said, they did switch up a few players. Like Cameron wasn't doing that much deep early. He played a
Hawkins
bit more
still
up.
hasn't really done much at all, but he's impacting contests, which is very helpful for us
Yeah,
all.
exactly. At least gives Hawkins a bit of a different look to work with. And yeah, as I mentioned before, Ollie Dempsey
Yeah, moving
going a bit
forward.
more forward. It says here Mitch Duncan switched to halfback. I didn't actually notice that
No, I didn't actually see
specifically,
that either, but that
but
makes a lot of sense.
yeah, but he ended up having a good game. So yeah, it was just Geelong again doing what they needed to do. It's like concerning, but you can't. It's better than losing.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
And as I said, our players breathe a sigh of relief. They still did some really good things early on. So, professional team like that, I think they'll continue, even though it wasn't like the best win.
Yeah, it wasn't
But
it wasn't
again,
like it wasn't a convincing win, despite what the scoreline
yeah,
says.
and again, as we'll talk like it's going to be a pretty big test. This week. So they'll be able to see how much of that is, um, you know, being able to convert that relief from a win to actual, momentum.
Yeah, I agree. Just to quickly rattle off the injuries from this game because there were a couple, unfortunately. Ollie Henry did a hammy. I don't know how bad it was. I don't think it definitely wasn't an ACL. I believe it was only a light injury.
Mm.
McKelty Lafau, that was a knee. That was confirmed ACL. That's our fifth
Mm.
one for the season, which is not pretty at all. So we're
No,
down a forward. It's always our
yeah,
forwards.
and it wasn't exactly strong coming into the season, so it's just
Well, he
how.
he was he was our bright spark because no one had
Oh yeah,
much hope for
100%.
him considering he had an NRL background.
And he did well, as I said, like it was weird because normally he like presents well but doesn't convert. Whereas this game he converted, a bit more limited, but still good impact.
Hmm.
But
He
obviously,
until he did the knee in the last quarter, he did exactly what we've been wanting him to do.
exactly, and as the fact that you even say it's a bit of a quiet game for him just shows how much respect and standards I think very early on we have for him.
Absolutely.
Because yeah, as I said,
So I don't know what we're gonna do with our forward line now because we need Bolter in the back line, but now we need him in the forward line because Lynch still isn't coming back till after the bye. I don't know who's coming in this week. I don't know who's ready. So
Kaczynski, I mean, you sort of
roll.
have to go back to that well, surely.
Yeah, I don't think we have a choice. So
Yeah.
we'll see. And then just as a quick end note, Marlon Pickett was subbed out with calf soreness. I think I don't think there's much in it. Like it's not an actual injury. He's just pulled up sore. It happens. He'll probably play next week or this week, I should say.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, because yeah, again, overall, happy with what I saw for a young team that's suffering through injuries. Credit to
Yeah.
Geelong for taking the win, and
And it's just a tale for Richmond. Like, they're definitely
we have the
they
pieces to
definitely
be
should have a
competitive.
few wins in
We
terms
just
of
don't
scrum
have all
battle.
of them on the field.
Exactly. There's still a lot of positives. As I said, they're a different category than, like honestly, in terms of week in, week out, I'd actually say they've had more impressive games than Hawthorn. And Hawthorn are starting to get there. So
It's
yeah.
like when
It's just
we're on, even though we're losing, we can still play a lot of these good teams close.
yeah.
And you can just look through the list of the games
Yeah.
we played this year, and you can see like
It's two disappointing games with an injury list of 10 million. So
yeah, exactly right. Like
yeah.
we're literally a skeleton crew at this point in time.
Yeah.
Speaking of a disappointing team, go on,
Oh,
Rob.
Melbourne? Or
Oh no, the
you wanted to
Essendon.
go first? Essendon? Yeah. I think it's just sort of caught up to them. Look, they were disappointing. There's no doubt about that. The Suns, however, they're looking to be a bit like the Adelaide of 2023. They took their, game against Still, I think Essendon got to be looking for that top 4 spot with
Absolutely, we're
where they
looking for
are
a
on the
top 4
ladder.
spot.
For the Suns, it was the second scalp for them, both at home, but still, good wins against Geelong and Essendon.
Mhm.
And yeah, as they recorded the win 14-7-91 to 11-14-80. I think both teams, considering the conditions, I'll say, had a good run of play with the sort of game style, I guess, that they wanted to have. Essendon, obviously, the 11-14 scored line. They've obviously had some bad direct conversion, but it was also a lot in their forward 50. While, as I said, Gold Coast would convert fairly truly, with players like Anderson and Rao being quite deadly with both their disposals and, score involvements, giving Long and King both had fantastic games. They scored 4 goals each. And yeah, as I said, defensively, it was a very mixed bag game for both teams. We don't really rate either defensively.
Very true.
But, as I said, it's just sort of, the intercept game was set up for both teams as well. Like, they were a lot better at generating intercepts than necessarily hardline defending. But yeah, so Gold Coast were able to convert a lot better from them, despite it being a very massive game in terms of that. It was 11-7, 73 to 9-8, 62 if you just took score from turnovers. So obviously for Gold Coast, that's 18 and 17 for Essendon. So there was a lot of chances. And yeah, from the back half, it allowed a lot of nice forward entries, um, with a lot of pressure off their defense easing up because they were able to generate those. Not only do you get the back half intercept, you also prevent a forward intercept yourself. A forward entry yourself. So, as I said, it's what Gold Coast were able to do most of the night.
Yep.
And yeah, as I said, both teams were able to send the ball deep inside 50. But yeah, Gold Coast just had the sort of, the one from bad, bad. It was bad forward 50 entries for Essendon, resulting in coast to coast goals, we'll call them. To
the Gold
Gold
Coast
Coast.
Suns. That's correct.
And yeah,
I'm
meanwhile,
sure.
the opposite had.
Sorry, I'm sure you'll mention it anyway. But like a lot of those coast to coast goals and a lot of the conversions went to King, which is huge for them because he hasn't been able to properly present for a couple of weeks.
And there's a few games where we've talked about like teams where offensively struggling. Adelaide would probably be the first one that springs to mind, where once they've generated that turnover game, their forwards have better leading patterns. They've found space a lot more. Like, they're not having those congested forward entries. So, it's good heads up by King, obviously, being able to play a bit more freely, converting on that. But, a lot of that was also due to, Gold Coast efforts up the ground. I will say Gold Coast did have sort of the opposite problem where they actually turned the ball over a lot more in the defense. Dons for the entire night still had some good forward pressure. But yeah, as I said, they just couldn't convert in the slippery conditions. And I don't think like the Gabba suited their sort of game style. It's a bit easier because obviously I tipped Essendon. But in retrospect, I can sort of see why that wouldn't, sort of go well for them. But yeah, they also had a bit more problems. One of them we will go into was Essendon's forward line, because conventionally there was nothing for them tonight. Peter Wright, Guelphy, Stringer, 1 goal between them. Peter Wright probably being
I
the
thought
most
Stringer had more of an impact, but I guess I was watching the wrong game.
No. I mean, Stringer got some score involvements, but off his own boot, he didn't get much. I think he scored 2 behinds for the night.
Actually, no, yeah, that's correct. No, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it was like 6 maybe score involvements. I can quickly check that. Yeah, it was definitely down on his normal. Yeah, no, it's not even showing up on Six. They're missing a note.
I found the thing that it was posted
Oh, three.
yesterday with Nick Martin, Zach Merritt, Kyle Langford, and Jake Stringer, four key offensive players, having 10 scoring
Yeah.
shots and returning only 10 behinds.
Yep. Yeah, that was sort of the next one I was gonna go to because yeah, as I said, their midfield generated from high pressure, getting that turnover, from sort of that half forward range. Like they had a lot of chains started from their forward half. But yeah, obviously two people that sort of got a few of those intercepts, obviously being Martin and Merritt. They contributed 5 behinds and no goals. And yeah, as I said, combine that with a forward line dip, you know. Also, I should say that Langford was subbed off in the fourth quarter with a hip concern. Unsure whether he had that the entire game or was just pushing through, but he looked very down.
I don't think it
And yeah,
would have made much of a difference in the end of the day, unless if he was
well,
carrying it
not
the
even
whole
that,
game.
but as I said, it's just might have been a reason that he was down.
Mm.
But yeah, he's been a bit down for the last month. I think he's dropped off a bit in the Coleman race. Um, but yeah, Nick Cox, he was actually weirdly enough, Essendon's best forward option. He sort of drifted late to fill in that the what do you call it? The Langford hole that was created. Started on the wing. I think he got 1 goal from his work on the wing and a couple when he was more up forward. But yeah, so at least they had that for him. Hind, I thought, in terms of offensively for the Dons, 10 score involvement, kicked a goal, 6 intercepts. And, that was sort of the forward pressure that at least got some of their game going. But yeah, as I said, not much for them. In terms of Gold Coast backline, because obviously when you're stuffing around with the ball, they get to be involved. Bodie Euland, not someone that we normally mention. Sam Collins both got involved the other way, getting 4 and 3 intercept marks. Collins got a further 11 intercepts 8 intercepts to go to 11.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Ulan shut down Stringer. So, 2 players that got really involved. Mac Andrews has solid intercepts with 8, but he was more focused on right. He was actually playing a bit more of a, go with hard defensive role. Played it quite well. So, not just the intercept bow that he has in his cap. But yeah, as I said, in terms of the ball going forward, Sam Flanders and Sexton racked up possessions off halfback. But overall, it was a midfield engine. Anderson, Rowell, and Miller, all great games. They got 73% of their total clearances from those 3. So, you could argue around the ground that it was a bit, focused on those 3 players. But, when they're playing that well, it's not that much of an issue. Anderson, the standout, 33 possessions, 17 contested, 8 clearances, 5 tackles, 14 ground ball gets. Rao defensively racked up 10 tackles.
Mm-hmm.
And he also led the pressure acts with 41, just pipping out Crispy, which is also how I knew Crispy had 40. So he led the entire round. And he also led Gold Coast score involvements with 9. So, Rao was pretty much also, maybe either or, given both pretty big games. And on the flip side, Caldwell, Durham, Merritt, again, solid games, but marred with inefficiency and turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, either with direct behinds or, turning the ball over, as I said. As I said, Gold Coast just racked up score from their midfield unit. And it really hurt Essendon. Redmond and Ridley had solid games. Heppel provided some nice link up at times. Again, Nick Martin, he's sort of like the pure, he's not a wingman. He'll like go from half back and he'll get possessions at half forward, but he's not necessarily playing either role. You know what I mean? It's, but as I said, he did well. Unfortunately, he didn't convert. And yeah, as I said, Essendon just, had a hard time defending even with the less inside 50s that they had to defend. Gold Coast got a lot of direct opportunity and defensively struggled with that. And, as I mentioned, Essendon still did get opportunities.
It just didn't convert.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and as I said, in terms of what I talked about before, if you have a throwback to when I did a deep dive on Essendon, they're someone that relies on possession dominance, being able to convert. That was there this game, but as I said, the capitulation just sort of didn't have it. So it's disappointing for Essendon, but you can take it one or two ways. A, you can say, oh well, this is going to be like a rare foray into like greasy Brisbane conditions for them, especially if Brisbane or the Suns don't make the finals. So, you can just say, oh, well, Essendon weren't used to it. There's still enough there. It's not as bad as you think. You can kind of have a bit of optimism that way. But on the flip side, we've been saying this for weeks, if Langford wasn't so good, Essendon are struggling to score enough,
Yeah,
which,
like
again, held true.
Both Langford and Stringer have been able to.
Stringer, yeah, too.
Both of them, but they've been able to essentially keep Essendon in a lot of these close games. And if one or both of them aren't firing, aren't converting, then that's a huge problem.
And especially, for clearances around the ground too, like that's how Stringer normally, because he's not as direct anymore. Like he's definitely around stoppages.
He plays a lot more middle time as well.
Into more playmaker. So, but yeah, he wasn't able to get much. 12 kicks, but 38% efficiency. Obviously, probably the poster child of turning the ball over. For Essendon's problems during the day. But as I said, it wasn't all bad. Like Archie Perkins, I actually thought distributed okay.
I do really like Perkins. I think he's a good player.
Yeah, no, he's definitely really solid. But on the flip side, as I said, maybe the Suns are just also that good at People's First Stadium. Maybe it's the new GM HBA Stadium, also known as Goomba. They're and it sort of makes sense when you think about it, because if you look at Gold Coast, they're one of the better teams in the league from scoring off turnovers. Not as much contested. So, when you're playing at a home ground that's often humid and they work very hard around their ground, they still get a lot of hard ball gets. Similar to Hawthorn, turning hard ball gets into good uncontested play. So I think one of the things for them, if they want to be a bit more consistent at other stadiums, is just work on stoppages around the ground. Because we've often seen it, we'll have Rao, Anderson and
Flanders.
Not Flanders. Miller getting a lot of clearances, but then like a big drop off for the rest of their list. So if someone like I don't know, because it's hard to see from the list who you would try and get involved in a bit more like forward stoppage plays. Maybe like I don't know, like is it Graham? No.
Closey, maybe you could push forward?
Huh?
You could probably push Closey further into the midfield.
Yeah, I said something like that. But yeah, I said, just needs a bit more, really. And I think that about wraps up what I want to say.
Good, because I want to interject, because the Rising Star has been announced for this round.
Yay!
And it goes to Bodie Euland.
Bodie! Because this is second year. I think he played 2 games.
No, it's his first year. This is his first year.
Absolutely guarantee it's Bodie Euland's second year.
No, sorry, you are correct. Made his debut in the first round of 2023.
In Supercoach, and I've got some fun facts about Bodie Euland.
So he's a graduate of Gold Coast Academy, which no one's really surprised about. But the reason why he got the Rising Star is because he took a game-high 13 marks, 4 intercepts, had 19 disposals at 89% efficiency in just his 13th game.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you mentioned it before, but he looks pretty incredible down back at the moment.
Yeah, it's been generating a lot of intercepts, can link up in chains, and it's sort of that dual player where he's not necessarily going to be the player of focus for either. But when because in a league where there's a lot of different forward line looks, having someone that can be serviceable at both, is good. And if he turns out that his possession goes a bit better because he's a great ball user, put him on halfback. If not, it's just that utility small forward defense. That's very useful.
Well, he's been very good at a one-on-one lockdown defensive utility, which is very, very good for the Suns because, especially, we've been very critical of their backline this season.
Yeah, I guess it's like overall defense. So they suffer a bit from movement. Like other teams. But yeah, as I said, it's not quite. It's got some good players down there, but it's not as knitted as other teams' backlines can be. They do suffer having runs of goals kicked against them. Similar to when Carlton was sort of, starting to find relevance again. They would look good, but then concede like 5 or 6 goals in a row against them and not look as good. But yeah, as I said, the only other thing I wanted to mention about Bodie Uland is that when I was looking at Supercoach options last year, I saw him. He had like one of those. It wasn't Fiverr. It was like a more professional version of Fiverr. But apparently, you could organize to learn League of Legends from him.
Oh,
so
he's
maybe
a
that's why he
he's a
wasn't.
league player.
Yeah, maybe that's why I didn't
Ew.
see many games last year. Maybe he was
He was
trying to curb off the addiction.
grinding.
Yeah, maybe.
Possibly.
But hopefully, despite that, he will continue to have a good career.
I mean, he's been a very good prospect so far.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So finishing up Fremantle. Melbourne?
Yes.
We haven't talked about that, have we?
You want to go on your big rant?
I don't have a rant for it. Do I?
No, you don't. I mean, our plan was for this was just talk about what went right for Freo, but we could talk about just how horrible Melbourne looked at the same time if you want.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of it was from a lot of it was from Melbourne's own foot. Like, let's be honest, they started off looking really. Melbourne looked really good. I thought they were going to win after the first 2 goals. Like, Fremantle left miles of space between opponents, and the effort was just a bit off. And it's exact switch. Melbourne just left so many players loose. Their midfield were not able to complete at all against Freo's midfield. Again, we see like another quietish game. I mean, his stats were okay at the end, but it all came sort of near the last quarter for Petrarca. Viney, he was hard, but turned the ball over a fair bit. And obviously the biggest one was probably Clayton Oliver. He's struggled at times this year.
He got shut down pretty hard this week.
Yeah, but really, I couldn't believe how much space some of the Freo forwards had. Like, it was pretty easy for them. Jai Amos obviously scoring 4 goals. Michael Walters getting involved. And it was almost like they forgot, like, sure, Michael Walters has been down, but he's a player you don't want to give space to.
Absolutely not.
3 goals, 1. Obviously I haven't brushed through the stats, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was high score involvements. Yeah, 6 score involvements. So a couple apart from that. But yeah, like, a lot of the forwards got to do what they want. Tam Switkowski, he was probably, arguably one of the best players of the game. He was involved in so much. 10 score involvements, a lot of possessions, really good. John Clark off halfback. Josh Tracy, he's a player.
Tracy had a great game.
Honestly, like, as good as Jai Amos has been, and is like great at converting shots when he can, like, I don't think Freo would have half as much success if it was just him. Like, Josh Tracy is like, he's like a forward quarterback, you know what I mean? Like, he's big, so he's able to take marks up, and he can provide link-up options.
He has a great set of hands, too.
And that's a dangerous thing, is when you're playing on that wing, you sort of actually find those moments forward where, you get a good matchup defensively. You take him a bit deep, unsurprisingly, and you get a few marks, where you don't necessarily have the best defender. You have, either someone playing wing or someone playing like a more halfback role. So yeah, he did really well. Scored 3 goals too. Um, I'm sorry about that.
Ah, you're good.
Um, yeah, what else? Oh, Hayden Young. I thought he was very classy.
Hmm.
Um, he beat Nick Dacos in meters gained, got 774,
Oh, we're
which is
back to
pretty
playing this
massive.
game, are we?
Yeah, yeah, and only from 16 kicks, 10 handballs. That's actually pretty massive. You know what I mean?
That is very
Like,
good.
yeah, and yeah, as I said, dominate clearance. Caleb's the wrong up there again. Brayshaw, another one like that. But yeah, Melbourne were pretty beaten uh, in a lot of areas.
Mm.
I mean, doubled in clearances. Almost as good as doubling as terms as marks goes. 96 marks to 142. They just didn't get their hands on it. And honestly, the effort was pretty putrid from like they were playing bad in the first half, but the lack of effort in the third and early in the fourth quarter was very concerning.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, honestly, you would be lambasting a struggling team for putting in that sort of effort. And for that to happen to like one of the probably more contenders. I mean, they're out the 8 now because they got beaten so badly in percentage.
It's the first time they've
Um,
been out of the 8 since they finished
uh,
ninth
yeah,
the other year.
uh, yeah. So, you know, um, yeah, it's just tough. Like,
2020. There you go.
yeah,
They finished ninth in 2020.
yeah, yeah. Because honestly, yeah, this could have been a lot worse. Like, there was a bit of junk time by Melbourne. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Fremantle, it was so comprehensive. It's hard to like really, take away. But I will say this: like, we did mention, a bit about the strategy of Fremantle and their ball movement and how much of that's just relying on weight.
Mm.
One of the things is that they're at least good at identifying when they've got that fast movement up in the middle. Because this week was a lot earlier, because they were giving him space. So the good thing for Freo fans is that they may be still trying to work out some of this forward ball movement, but if a team's willing to give it to them, they're going to take it, and they're going to look dangerous while doing it. So, yeah. And again, like Freo fans, when their best run has been in like defensive pillory teams, just having this like comprehensive win, it's a good feeling for them, and not something they get too often. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
congrats to them. That's about all I want to say, personally. Is there anything you specifically have that you
I
noticed, or
I think Jake Lever does a lot more for Melbourne than people realize.
yeah,
I think that's who they were missing the
it's weird
most because I think he's
because
actually,
we've had
despite
games when
despite how
May,
prominent Stephen May is, I think Jake
yeah.
Lever is actually their leader down the back. I
Well, the
think
proof
he's the
is
one
like
that
is in the game this
reads
year.
everything so
Like
much
May's
better.
been out,
May's
and
been out.
Lever, like
Lever's
the
been
defense
out.
under Lever. No, sorry, May when May's been out and it's just been Lever,
Their
the
defense still
defense
looks
still
decent.
looks terrific.
Yeah,
And this time, like, I mean, obviously they were bad defensively, but it was still very lopsided. A lot of it came from the middle as well. But I don't think, as I said, it was a combination of both.
I think Lever, like, I think Stephen May is too brutish, I guess, in terms of like being commanding in regards to like positioning and stuff like that. Whereas I think
Yeah,
whereas I think Lever's a lot more logical, a lot more like he thinks more of the
yeah.
brains rather
I,
than.
I was gonna say flexible, but logical's too. Like in a fast turnover and all that. Like I think May in
I think he
terms of
reads the
like
ball a lot
stoppages.
better than May.
Yeah, like May in terms of stoppages and all that. Like from slow plays, he kills teams, and that's what's damaging about Lever is Lever can sort of adjust when the turnover game's sort of going for them.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, as I said, obviously in this game there was a lot of turnovers
And there's just
scored,
nothing you can do
and
about it. She didn't have your turnover,
yeah,
man.
and and yeah, and to give their defense credit, like you look at score sources for stoppages, 8 goals free, 51 for Fremantle,
Mm-hmm.
0-3-3 for Melbourne. They couldn't manage 1 goal from stoppage. And this is a team where it's not a terrible avenue score for them. I don't think it's as strong as you might imagine with
No,
a
I
team like,
think they just win a lot more
Petrarca
out
and
of clearances because they have 3 clearance bulls in the midfield.
yeah, but as I said, it's still not quite as bad as like 0 go 3. Like, yeah, they score 34.3 from stoppage. League average is 32.
Hmm.
So, and Fremantle are good at defending that, but it was just damning how much of a beating it was in the center. As I said, their midfield had possessions. They didn't do much with them. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
that's the thing about Freo is they're not going to win every tap. Like even Darcy, as I said, he doesn't win 100% of his taps,
Very
but you
true.
sure as hell know that the taps he does produce are giving it a Fremantle, and when he does lose it, he's not like leaking a huge advantage the other way. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
correct.
he's one of the best. The ones he losers aren't that bad for Freo.
No, I agree.
As Gorn, like, yeah, Gorn technically won the hit out. His impact was pretty negligible.
One of the very few
So
times he gets
yeah,
beaten.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that's about it for that.
Well, I mean, it's one of the only games that ever gets played at Alice Springs. In fact, I'm pretty sure only one
Yeah,
game a
no, I
year
will
gets
say it
played in
was a
Alice
beautiful
Springs.
day.
It was a beautiful day. It was
Look,
gorgeous in
I'm gonna
the
admit,
red
last
center.
week on the podcast, I think I did get mixed up a bit. I think I thought some of the night game games were Alice Springs, and I thought the one in in Darwin was
The
like
one in
Alice
Darwin's
Springs.
TIO Stadium. The one in Alice Springs is
Yeah, yeah,
TIO
yeah,
Traeger Park, which
yeah,
they're sponsored
exactly.
by both sponsored by TIO. So that's what
Yeah,
gets
which is
the.
where I got confused because it was like not only it's gonna be like a very like humid, trashy game, but this is the one with the tree in it, and I like the ground with the tree in it. The beautiful ground.
It is beautiful ground.
If it's cool enough, it can actually play some pretty nice football there. So
I'd love to go
maybe if
there
they
for a
do make
game at one point.
yeah, if they do put a game in the Northern Territory or team in the Northern Territory, split the games up. Do as smart as you can. It might be put them on the back foot, but I think I don't think they can have an entire season in Darwin. That's just going to be
No, definitely not.
mm,
Anyway,
yeah, a bit tough.
anyway, it's a weird game for Melbourne. Credit to Freo, they needed the percentage boost anyway, so take
Well,
that and run with
they
it.
got the draw. They're only competing with Essendon, but they're beating them on that account. So
Well, there you go. So, before we start heading off towards what next round has in store for us, I'm gonna take a look at the MRO reports. We've kind of already touched on some of these, but just to
yeah,
go over them again, Sam Darcy will miss 2 matches for rough conduct against Brayden Maynard. My personal opinion, Maynard deserved it because he's a dog. Come at
it's
me,
still
Collingwood
2 weeks.
supporters. I don't care. Um,
It's still 2 weeks.
yeah, well, it was a very similar act to what Maynard did to
Yeah, late high and
Angus,
off the ground. In terms of tribunal, that's pretty clear cut for the year.
and yet Maynard didn't get off because it was a grand final.
Mm,
Sorry, Maynard did
okay,
get off because it was a grand final.
also a decent point, but yeah,
That's where the issue. Like, granted, yeah, I know there are rule changes and shifts in
yeah, I
adjudications
definitely timed it
from
up.
one season to another, but if if it wasn't a grand final, Maynard probably would have gotten suspended. Same with Trent Cotchin in 2017 against the hit on Dylan Shields. He would have
Yeah,
gotten suspended if it wasn't going into a grand final.
yeah, that was pretty.
So it's a fair point. There's
Oh yeah, players always get off with that sort of thing, but
it's ridiculous
what
because
can you
it's
do?
technically not fair, but
Yeah,
you know, MRO,
yeah,
whatever.
fell isn't fair though, especially with all that Vic bias going along. Tell you what.
Sure. In saying that, we could
Uh,
literally just be getting like a Sydney v Interstate team grand final this year with the way it's looking.
maybe,
Um,
maybe.
Riley
Anyway,
West
the
will
rest of the
miss.
reports.
Yeah, true. will miss one match for rough conduct against Jeremy Howe. I think it might have just been a bad tackle. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I think so.
And then the big one for this week, which is being challenged tomorrow night, I believe. Harley Reid will miss 2 matches for rough conduct against Darcy Wilson. It was a sling tackle. Everyone saw it. It's news everywhere. Yeah, they're challenging it because he still played out the match, had no injuries going out of it. But it was still a sling tackle.
Yeah, it's very bad technique. For those who just read the paper, Simpson said there was nothing in it, but it was very tongue in cheek. Like that was more just I can't comment on this. I'm always going to defend the player until it goes to tribunal. Look, they're probably going to look at it, and from other cases where impact has lessened it, that's probably going to argue. I couldn't see going lower than 1 though. Like he's ruled out of the Rising Star, I think.
Yeah, if he doesn't get off, he's ruled out of the Rising Star.
Yeah, which is the big implication.
Because of his age and the limited amount of games that he's played, he'll still be eligible for it next season.
Yeah,
which is
a bit of upside there.
Silver linings.
Yeah, like honestly, I don't think the AFL can allow tackles like that. There have been tackles that haven't been as damaging that have gone down over the years.
Yeah.
Just due to the bad technique. Like it was pretty bad. Like it was almost in the NFL. It's what's called a horse collar tackle, where they grab from the back of the jersey. And I actually think that actually made it worse because you're doing that, you're getting whiplash from the head, and you're pulling it down towards the ground.
Yeah.
So I really hope it doesn't change. He deserves the 2 weeks. He'll learn from that young kid, but I don't think there was any malice. It was just
no, absolutely not.
Bad tackle.
Bad form. So. It happens.
Exactly.
All right, on to the ladder after the end of the current round. Top 2 hasn't changed. Sydney and Essendon are still on top. Geelong has moved up to 3rd. Port has moved down to 4th. Carlton and Freo have moved up to 5th and 6th respectively. GWS have dropped down to 8th. The Gold Coast Suns are back in the top 8 after being there at the start of the season. Whether that will last, we'll see. They should stay there by the end of this week, the end of this coming round, honestly. But after that, it'll certainly be a fight.
Melbourne teams out the 8, lazy.
Well, Collingwood's out of the 8, which is something we all love to see. They're currently sitting at 9th. Melbourne have dropped to 10th. The Doggies didn't move; they're still at 11th position. Hawks have moved up to 12th, which is very good for them. And honestly, they could genuinely fight for at least 9th or 10th. They're not going to make top 8, but if they can get at least,
they might be mathematically possible at
top
some
10,
point
it'd be good to see for them. Brisbane hasn't moved; they stayed 13th. Adelaide dropped down to 14th. That's purely based on percentage. Otherwise, they would have gone to 13th. And then the bottom 4 hasn't changed: 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th. That's St Kilda, West Coast, Richmond, and North Melbourne.
Yeah. Might see some movement after this week. But yeah, we're going to go back to scuff ladders with the buys.
It's going to be a bit of a mess.
Yeah, one note before, and just quickly, we go to the next week's games.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find the hole in the ball rule?
I thought, apart from a couple of issues, there was one definitely in the Gold Coast Essendon game that was very questionable. Everyone saw that one. But I think for the most part, I think it's made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
It's definitely done what it was meant to, and I think from public reception has been a lot better on it at the moment. Whether it stays that way, that remains to be seen.
Yeah. I want to give full credit to the umpires for the way that they were able to implement. I honestly thought there were maybe 2 games that I saw out of, where I thought it was a bit iffy. Most of the time you could at least see, the consistency. 1 or 2 missed goals is not really going to have an impact. As long as you know generally what you're going to get. As I said, I just want to take a time to give a bit of a props to them. Umpires get a pretty hard knock. Sometimes they deserve it. But they're always trying, and it's AFL puts them in a very tough positions at times, and thought they adapted well. I thought, as I said, we didn't see many dangerous tackles, lingering like we did last week.
No,
And, good on them.
yeah, credit.
Might see a shift in game style. It's a bit weird to see that midway. Like, coaches would probably hate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
but
they always want to protect
I don't
their
think it
players,
really
but
is
they're
a
just like,
massive shift in game style. Like, peak teams are still tackling.
yeah, it's just, I suppose, like, in terms of contested ball and like how you might set up a few players. Honestly, it might be list management thing. How much you rate.
I mean, it could also
hard nut.
be it might have shifted some plans in terms of how stoppages work.
Yeah.
But otherwise, and like teams that play well off of stoppage clearances and things like that. But otherwise, I think it probably would have just stayed the same for a lot of teams.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what I mean. I mean, coaches are very finicky beasts anyway. So
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They don't like much change, let alone mid-season. But yeah, overall good for the competition. We'll see if there's any quirks, but we'll give it the tick for the round one.
Yeah, agreed. Before we move on to looking at the next round, I want to quickly go over the Coleman medal because we're halfway through the season now, and it's starting to shape up pretty well. It's been a tough race, so I'm just going to touch on the top 10 players at the moment. I have a full list of players that are 18 goals or higher at the moment in front of me, but I'm only going to touch on the top 10 or the ones that are certainly in a closer race for it. So we've got 2 at number 1 position with 36 goals apiece, being Charlie Curnow and Ben King. Rounding out top 3 is Jesse Hogan with 31. Jake Waterman.
Game behind, obviously.
Currently game behind because I had to buy this week. Jake Waterman has 30 goals, having kicked, 15 goals out of like 3 or 4 games? Something like that?
Yeah, missed 2 games as well, so...
So it's been very impressive to see him catch up. Harry Mackay and Kyle Langford top 6 with 28 apiece. Bailey Fritsch with 27. Josh Tracy with 24. Tyson Stengel with 24. Jake Stringer with 23. Aaron Norton, Sam Darcy, Jeremy Cameron, and Will Hayward with 22. And then you've got a bunch of other players. A Richmond player actually makes this list that I'm looking at. Shea Bolton has 19 goals. I'm glad someone's in there at least. So
there's a couple of things you can take out. Like Sydney, for as much offense as they had, it's mainly due to their midfield. Yeah,
and they have a lot of distributors. Like, for example, on this list, I think they have 4 or 5 players that are 19 goals or more, which is Logan McDonald, Chad Warner, Joel Amati, and Will Hayward. So it's like no one is going to be able to get the Coleman because they just have way too many contributors.
Exactly. And obviously, Josh Tracy, he'll be the first Freo player in a while to be high up in the Coleman.
If he can make top 5, that'd be very, very impressive considering their season.
Yeah, I don't think he will, just because, as I said, he plays more of a distribution role. But, like, as I said, it's really gone under the radar from anyone outside of WA. So I'm gonna keep on harping on. You'll probably be sick about it, but I mean, it's better than constant re-talk. So
hey, I mean, if you, I'm perfectly okay with you talking about Tracy and Waterman. Like, you got to give WA something at the moment.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the games for this week. Adelaide and Richmond at the Adelaide Oval Thursday night. I actually won't get to watch this game because I have tickets to a taping of a TV show, which I'm very excited about. So I'll completely miss this game. Considering we don't have a forward line at the no, it's not. It's not football related at all, actually. But considering we don't have a forward line at the moment, I'd probably give Adelaide the benefit of the doubt on this one. However, they also don't have a forward line at the moment. So I think this might end up being a midfield battle.
Yeah.
It's
but yeah, their backline's still very solid. So
yeah, their backlines are a lot better than ours. Especially if we have to move Bolter back into the forward line. We lose a lot of strength in the back.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how many turnovers there are in this game. I'm not gonna say it's gonna be pretty to watch, but it might be close.
I don't feel comfortable even giving a tip onto this one at the moment until I know what the teams look like.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm still going to give it to Adelaide. They just have enough top
Adelaide
end talent.
definitely are favorites in this one, and they'll probably end up
Yeah.
winning, especially because it's at AO. But overall, it's too hard to call right now.
Yeah. I'll give Richmond some respect, but yeah, it's just so hard to tip them with the state that they're in, injury
Yeah,
wise.
yeah, that's pretty much my situation. All right, Western Bulldogs and the Brisbane Lions at Marvel Stadium Friday night.
Oh, two teams that are like very similar in terms of it's their terms or
Well,
nothing.
Doggies are coming off of a pretty strong win against Collingwood, and Brisbane
Oh
are
yeah.
coming off of a bye and have to travel.
Yeah. Um yeah,
It,
it's gonna be tough, especially I think defensively for Brisbane. Um yeah, so I think the Bulldogs will find a bit too much avenue to goal.
mhm.
And we've mentioned it for Bulldogs, is that defensively purely they're not the best, but they're okay.
No,
They
they're
struggle a lot
very
from
middle of the pack in
transition.
terms of their defense.
Yeah, but Brisbane, they're not the best team. Like a lot of theirs is more inside work than outside work.
Mhm.
So I'll just edge the Bulldogs. There's just a lot of small things that would have it in their favors. I don't trust either team.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. Now, honestly, I think this will be a really, really fun game to watch. Hawthorn and GWS
Hawthorn
down in
Kings,
Tassie.
yeah. Ooh, in Tassie
In
too. I didn't know
Tassie.
that. Yeah. Oh,
GWS
it's
actually have a pretty decent track record in Tasmania, off the top of my head. I
yeah,
know they played down there a couple of times now.
yeah. It's sort of like one of the few teams that have been willing to, you know, go up there
I
in recent times.
I think the Giants will definitely benefit off of having the week break. I think the Hawks, after
Yeah.
having a lot of really tough games, having to do a lot of work over the past couple of weeks, might actually catch up with them. But overall, I
No,
mean, the
it's
Giants are
definitely.
also
I
just
mean, you saw it late
structurally.
in the Adelaide game.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
it's. But yeah, I honestly,
But again, it's
I
also
think
the
it's just a good
bikers.
metric.
Like, it's
I
a
don't know.
it's a thing.
It kind of is. Like, I don't lie. It's not. It's definitely more than, I think just some teams deal with it better. You
Mm.
know what I mean? I think sometimes it goes to like teaching stuff and structure, but yeah, I do so want to say Hawthorn because I haven't really, in terms of tipping, I don't think I've given them as much respect
I
as,
want to give Hawthorn the edge, especially because I've really liked what I've
yeah.
seen. But I think the Giants are just structurally better.
Oh, yeah, and if you look on paper, like, it's weird that you would even give Hawthorn half a chance here, but
Mm.
um, yeah, like the Giants. They haven't looked that great over the last few. Well, I guess a bit over a month, but the bye obviously
Yeah.
uh, part
Well,
of that. But
this has come
we'll
up
see.
pretty quick. Round 2 of the Spoon Bowl. Even though
Yeah, is
West
it?
Coast might not be 17th, but it's technically a Spoon Bowl because it's the bottom 4 team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the prelude spin ball before Richmond eventually get their
Get to North, yeah.
chance. Yeah.
Well,
Um.
it's over in Perth, Optus Stadium. Um,
Yeah.
I think I think it's pretty convincingly going to be West Coast, but
Yeah, and especially if they get Waterman back.
yeah, like I don't know
Um.
what he was a laid out with soreness, I think, so I don't think it was anything
Yeah,
bad.
you would imagine, but who knows? I think we would have heard about it by now if it's anything more serious. But
Yeah, I think when I read the little changes from that match, I'm pretty sure it was only just soreness.
yeah,
So yeah, probably
um,
give West Coast the edge on that one. Pretty convincing edge.
yeah. The one thing I will say about North Melbourne, again, they're pretty solid in clearances. Haven't always converted that to scoring,
Mm.
but they do. Um, you know, but at the same time, as I said, they concede 76 points, I think, per game from turnover, which is obviously the highest in the league,
Yes, off the top of my head.
which is pretty insane. Like, I don't even think, I don't even think North average 76 points themselves per game. So,
They've had one game that
um,
was really, really close. Like they scored close to 100
They
points,
had an
didn't they?
alright effort in the first half of the year, but it's dropped. Like, there's no doubt about it. I mean, they had some signs. Again, it's just little things for North. But again, try and keep them under 100. I don't think they'll win. Who knows? It's football. Things can happen.
So we can start seeing some
I'm
improvements.
going to go West Coast, but I'm going to go West Coast for a fair bit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right, another interesting game. Saturday night, St Kilda v Gold Coast at Marvel Stadium.
And this is where I think like the nullifying effect of St Kilda might actually affect Gold Coast a lot.
Well, it's
Because
going to
I
be
mentioned like
it's going to be King versus King, which is something that is always fun to see every year.
I mean not literally, but I mean I would.
Well, yeah, it's not like the
I guess it would be
Mackay's
Ross
where
Lyon.
they can actually match up against each other and never do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, assuming King is playing, because as I said, he might not.
Oh yeah,
But
there was an injury there, wasn't there?
yeah, there was his injury, but hopefully we'll get it because I bet the advertisers will like it. But yeah, as I said, it's more just like you know that in terms of stoppages, I think St Kilda should be able to stop them quite well. Gold
Mhm.
Coast, as I mentioned, struggle from that, so that's like an avenue where Gold Coast is sort of should be restricted. Again, it will rely a lot of St Kilda's ball use. If they can tighten that up, have some of the movement they had last game, I'll give them half a look.
Yeah.
Especially stoppages around the ground. As I said, like they haven't been great at that either. So, you know,
Well,
it's an avenue.
if
for
they're
St
able to
Kilda.
shut down Gold Coast midfielders, I think St Kilda will definitely have a decent chance.
Yeah. Again, maybe not pretty though.
No, I think it's
I'm not
going
sure I'm
to
excited to watch the game. But I think
be
it'll
a
be interesting to
rough
see
game. I
exactly
think.
what these two teams. Yeah, it's a solo game, so I mean, I'm probably gonna watch it. I don't have much going on for me. I got the time.
I don't know if my best friend is interested, we might go, but depends on if she's busy or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Sunday games, two massive
Ooh,
blockbusters,
great.
which is genuinely interesting for a Sunday lineup. But then again, we've got a public holiday Monday in Victoria this week.
Yeah.
So, Sydney and Geelong at the SCG.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that Geelong has historically been like up there in terms of like being premiership threats,
I don't
like in
think
terms of
that's going
current
to be a
form,
big
it's Sydney all
case.
the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Geelong is going to be
Like-
much of a threat this week.
You wouldn't think so, but I don't know. I've never liked ruling out Geelong, but yeah, as I said, it's just you can't. Like, it would be disrespectful to say that there's any real major flaw that is exposable for Sydney.
Yeah.
With the way they're playing. Not that they're bulletproof, but you know what I mean. It's
No,
just,
Sydney definitely aren't bulletproof. But
yeah, like
they just look too
you're
good.
trying to make up narratives to try and say like anyone has a certain in, because I don't think any team's been consistent enough to hold a candle to them. But you only have to beat them in one game. Again, the forward line looks for Sydney, if Geelong's defense can hold up, which they sometimes can, is a bit shaky, but they did eventually restrict Richmond. Might be just because their own legs, but at least they were able to like hold up some of those transition movements and all that sort of jazz.
Yep, I agree.
So I think defensively it's probably the way to go for Geelong. Apart from that, I think Sydney just beat them in every other matchup.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I mean, pretty clear cut, but who knows what could happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous to think, like, as a team, I still respect a lot with Geelong, can be so far, in my mind, away from Sydney. And I'm still excited to see it, because,
I mean, it's considered one of the blockbusters all around. Why wouldn't you be?
Yeah.
And the
I'm
second...
excited about the next game, though. Yeah.
I mean, this will be also considered a blockbuster, but this could go very, very different.
Yeah.
Essendon and Carlton at the MCG.
There's always a bit of, not bad blood between the teams, but it's just like a slightly different set of affairs with this game.
Yeah. I mean, it's Essendon's in the weirdly shaky form, and Carlton going going for a bit of a run.
Yeah, no, I think they're maturing. And again, it's a bit like the Sydney Geelong game. Is like I think in all areas, like Carlton are a bit better, but Carlton have let teams score against them, getting their game plan going. So if they let Essendon's entries become too easy, we've seen how good they have been at converting. If you take last week as an aberration, like this could be like a 98-90 win to Essendon sort of game.
It could be high
But yeah, I
scoring, it could be
imagine.
very close.
Yeah, I'm hoping. Because yeah, so it'll be a good way to cap off the week.
Mm. But it's
Yeah.
not even the cap. We've still got a spectacular
Yeah.
Monday game. But yeah,
Exactly.
I'd probably tip Carlton on that one. Just purely based on
Yeah.
form, based on team structure at the moment.
Exactly. And again, if Langford plays or not, that'll be a big factor. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think form dictates that Carlton should get this tip.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, they've earned the tip, even if I think it might be avenues for Essendon to try and win.
All right, now the big Monday blockbuster, the big freeze game. Collingwood and Melbourne, traditional King's birthday / Queen's birthday weekend game. All for a good cause.
Yeah. Big freeze, obviously.
Yes.
Grab your beanie if you haven't.
I don't know on this one, I'll be honest. Sure, the game against Freo for Melbourne could just be an aberration, but also their defense looks really shaky without Lever. And for Collingwood, they're a little all over the place because of their injuries.
Yeah.
They might get lucky with a couple back, but I don't know what their list currently looks like.
Yeah. And like Collingwood, they're not a team primed to like take advantage of the defensive lapses of Melbourne. Like their forward pressure. So I think like any of the turnovers were probably already going to like sort of exist. And like the one-on-one matchups, they don't normally like really get traditional goals. You know what I mean? Like your standard set shots. Especially with Myercheck not playing.
Yeah, no Myercheck. No, I don't know if Elliott's going to be in.
Like,
no DeGoey. Tom Mitchell didn't play last week. He might not play this week.
So, it's going to be tough for Collingwood. I'll probably edge towards Melbourne as bad as they were last week. But I have a huge amount of respect for the last couple of weeks with Collingwood playing, sort of the way they have, still being competitive with the amounts of outs they've got. The structure's really fantastic. I don't think it's going to be, a bad game by them. I think it might just be missed opportunities that rack up, but
yeah,
Melbourne's also a team that can generate a lot of missed opportunities.
Absolutely.
Non-confidently tipping Melbourne for now.
Yeah, I think I'll probably lean towards Melbourne as well, but I might swing my tip closer to the game, depending on ins and outs. I'll probably do that with a lot of these games, actually, just because of how close some of these are. But yeah. And for audio listeners, if you aren't aware, Port and Freo have the bye for this round.
Yep. Which means I get the whole week off because I only report on 2 games.
You are dreaming.
Lazy. Good luck with the 8.
Yeah.
Games I got this week.
If you're going to do that to me, I'm just going to get snapped back in.
Snap. Okay. We'll see.
All right. Before we start to wind it down, I want to touch on a bit of news that came out just before we released last week's podcast. So the AFL teams went up to the heads of the AFL and gave them a list of things that they want changed over the next season or two. Some of these we kind of did have a look through this before I wanted to bring it up. Some of these are decent ideas. Some of these are, but we're just going to quickly go through them, rattle them off, and talk a little bit about the ones that are more interesting. So we'll go team by team because that's the list that this article is in. The article was written by Tom Morris from Channel 9. So we'll start with Adelaide. Their main priorities is a national reserves competition. They want the AFL reserves to come back. There are still some contractual agreements that they have with Sandful that will need to be organised. They're also more supportive of mid-season trading out of most of the non-Victorian clubs. They will also like to work with draft picks 2 or 3 years in advance. I think that's a stupid idea, I'll be honest.
I mean, I don't trust clubs enough to give them that much leeway.
Yeah, no, I
wouldn't
don't
mind it.
either.
It's dig your own hole, but you just hate it if your club's doing stuff like that, screwing themselves over.
They're also interested in kind of rezoning academy systems, which it also doesn't really sound great in terms of.
I don't think there's so much as rezoning, but they don't want it to expand much more than it already is.
Yeah, well, they don't want academy teams from outside of South Australia to start getting their hands into South Australia.
Yeah.
Which I guess is fair enough, but also like there is plenty of talent in the other states as well that Adelaide could also try and get.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like it's not quite zones. It's just gonna be like so much scouting, and I mean, in terms of like, I think there's already enough pressure on the young kids. You know, as I said, it's ridiculous how professional we're making them. You know, go to academies, train them up, instilling certain standards. While it's great for having players come straight in, you know, if you get injured early on, you know, it does pigeonhole a lot of people. So, yeah, as I said, I don't mind the academies. It's just a part of sports, but I don't want to see like every state have an academy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just think it's one of those things where they're worth in lesser football states, Queensland, New South Wales. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
There's less natural
about to
pathways.
mention the exact same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So they get it. Every other state, like WA, doesn't need one. We're football mad. We don't have any competition. There's plenty of pathways already. If you're good, we'll find you out.
Brisbane, they're happy. They're interested in the idea of trading draft picks 2 or 3 years ahead of time. They're against the mid-season trade period because they believe they wouldn't get any talent mid-year, or they would struggle to attract talent mid-year, I should say.
Yeah.
Because I agree, no one really wants to go to Queensland.
Especially in the winter.
Oh no, Queensland in the winter is actually quite nice, but no one really wants to be up there permanently because the summer is atrocious.
Yeah.
But the big one for Brisbane is that they just want chartered flights for interstate trips, especially long haul ones like to Perth, which I guess is pretty understandable.
It's like the longest interstate flight, I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Because, well, if there was a team further north, or like more games further north, then from north either to Melbourne or to WA would be it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's Brisbane to Perth is pretty much the longest flight at the moment in terms of AFL teams.
Definitely.
For Carlton, they did not make an official comment, but they're critical of the current talent pathway in Victoria and development systems in place. They want an academy. Pretty much, they want an academy zone, and they're kind of targeting the Bendigo sort of area, which I think is pretty untapped. I'll be honest. I think regional Victoria is fairly untapped.
Yeah, I can imagine like some of it.
Like most of the teams, they're also in favor of the AFL reserves coming back. But I don't want the AFL to change its draft value index because of certain, father-son prospects and players like that are coming up through the system.
It's going to be a common theme. The Victorians do not want to change. The original teams. I shouldn't say pure Victorians because, but it does heavily favour some of the old guard and heavily disadvantages. I talked about a bit on the week, as I say, it's ridiculous that North didn't have a legitimate shot at getting Nick Dacos.
Mm-hmm.
When you got one team that went in the top 4 and one team that, could have used a generational talent like him, Like at least
Yeah, well,
have
you say that
some.
like they don't already have like 3 or 4 generational talents.
Deco's a bit different.
Yeah, well, yeah, Dacos in comparison
He
is
would have
probably
gone number one. Like,
absolutely.
there's no doubt.
But yeah, him and Harley
Yeah,
Reid are probably the 2 generational talents for this sort of mix
probably.
of players. Anyway, speaking of Collingwood, Collingwood are after shorter quarters to protect the health of the players. I actually quite like the sound of that. I agree that the game's a little too fast, and that's why we're
Yeah,
having so many injury issues.
3 or 4 minutes, I reckon you could probably afford.
Yeah, like what? Well, it's 20 minutes plus time on, right? So shave
Yeah,
2 or 3 minutes off of that base time and just let time on play afterwards.
as I said, it probably equals to about maybe 15 minutes shorter game.
Yeah, that's not a
If you
bad
add it all
thing.
up.
In fact, it's probably better for
Yeah.
spectators as well in the long term.
Yeah, I always find that, I always find that there's a bit of a lull between, quarters. I think sometimes it might bring a bit of urgency as well. You know, um, some clubs, like to make their charges late and all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. It's just
Um,
theory ball.
Again, they also are very interested in the AFL reserves competition. They definitely want to try to invest more in it so it can be a long term competition, and they're also interested in the third tier competition. So that'd be um, like older players, not necessarily players that could play in the AFL, but like more like top up players and things like that. I would assume.
Hmm.
Um, they're also interested in uh, a fair market price for academy, NGA, and father son players.
Hmm.
Um, they believe clubs still need to be encouraged to invest in NGA talent, which I guess makes a lot of sense because that's the system that clubs don't have much of an eye on.
Yeah, it's a very what do you call it, libertarian approach
Hmm.
to that. It's like, oh, if everyone gets involved, like it'll all be fair. But I just don't think it's going to work for some areas and
Collingwood,
teams.
this is something that a lot of the fans also want is uh,
Yeah,
pretty much the
eyes tidy up.
fixture reorganized. They want to see the buy rounds tidied up. They put forward the idea of adding more games to opening round and giving some of the workload to Perth as well as Sydney and
Hmm.
Brisbane, like we had this year. I like that idea. Like honestly,
Yeah,
like being able to promote the game. Granted, WA and South Australia are AFL states, but being
pretty solid.
able
Yeah,
to do do opening round in Perth and have keep gather round in Adelaide, I think is brilliant in terms of growing the game to much bigger audiences. And
mm.
I hate to say it, but I do agree with Collingwood in a lot of what they want.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, they're very. They know like how clubs work and how to make spectacles of things. They just want a lot from themselves as well. Like it's a bit of the rich getting richer, but they're at least, they know how to make you know what works in terms of like making clubs exciting and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Essendon's is pretty quick. They definitely believe that the system for the Northern Academies and the NGA needs to be reviewed. And they're also pushing for a review into certain aspects of the MRO process, which is funny considering Brad Scott used to be the head of the umpiring department.
Hmm.
So you'd think he'd have a little bit more of an idea as to what already goes on in the MRO, but clearly he's trying to push for something a little bit that's a little bit more public information for
Yeah.
not just the general audience, but also or sorry, the general public, but also the teams. I would assume.
Yeah.
Frio, um, they are they are. I wouldn't say firmly against opening round and gather round, but they're definitely against more travel. Like they,
Yeah, travel was huge on
which I guess is why they
considering
probably
the
align
news.
themselves with Collingwood's idea of possibly hosting something in Perth for opening round, for an
Yeah,
example. Um, the Dockers are adamant they want to remain aligned with Peel Thunder, and that a second tier competition would be a huge imposition from a travel, resources, and logistics perspective. I completely get that, um,
mm.
which is why like giving them some leeway in terms of some extra funding for travel and things like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say the AFL needs to put money in this if they're gonna like even like Gold Coast or GWS is that it's gonna come into their budget as well. Um, you know,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
West Coast don't mind it; they've got money out the wazoo, but Freo, there's still a
Um,
bit more
Dockers
blue
would,
collar.
yeah, exactly right. The Dockers would also like changes to the NGA and Father Son system. I think most clubs are kind of on agreement on that one. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, the club, both West Coast and Freo are definitely united in the idea of fairer travel schedule. That's I want them to have that. They definitely deserve it because they're so far away from everyone else.
yeah.
Um, Geelong, Geelong genuinely don't care, to put it simply. They're happy to just
Whatever.
go with the flow. They have been critical of knee-jerk reactions to um, priority picks and assistance packages purely because of the fact that, they've been so good for so long on with so much
Yeah,
different talent.
it's like why
Um,
don't you just do every pick perfectly?
that
The football's simple if you do that.
they believe they've been somewhat disadvantaged because of um, their picks in their football program going to rival teams over the past 15 years. But in saying that, they're also open to a mid-season trade and in favor of greater player movement, and also interested in trading picks more than 1 year in advance. Um,
I mean,
they also
the team that's
apparently are
best list
interested
manager.
in giving coaches more money. That definitely sounds like a Chris Scott sort of idea rather
Oh,
than
definitely.
like a Cat CEO sort of idea.
Probably.
Um, the Gold Coast Suns, they just want a they want a bigger assessment for everything going on. Um,
Mm.
they believe academies are an essential way of engaging the youth and to develop talented and non-traditional market. I think we're both in agreement in that the academy teams in Queensland and South Australia and New South Wales
Mm.
are good because they're NRL
Yeah.
states. Um,
As you said, it could go to country Victoria, but I have no idea how they're going to stick claims with all the teams there. Who gets what is just.
no, I definitely think letting them have the broader Queensland area alongside Brisbane,
Yeah.
and even letting New South Wales have some of that territory as well to try and get talent into Sydney and GWS, I think is perfectly fine. Um, Contrary to many Victorian clubs, Gold Coast is adamant academy list rules should be retained for northern clubs, which is kind of what we just touched on anyway. Um, they also want travel and fixture disadvantages to be addressed by more home state matches in the other states, or to expand the concept of gather round to the other states. Um,
Yeah.
that's something that I think all of the interstate teams are in agreement with, and we have no issues with that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think people want to go to Queensland, but it's definitely, they've been the
No
blue
one wants to go
shafted
to Queensland, but they
of the
exist.
in-the-state teams. Sorry, Queensland.
It's too hot up there. It's that simple. For GWS, compensation picks of free agents should begin at pick 11. I actually agree with that. I think the top 10 should remain as is,
Yeah.
and that should be distributed fairly, unless, unless, father son prospects. I think that's something that they'll try to maybe put a little stamp on as to whether that's fair or not. Um, the Giants are opposed to a mid-season trade period unless clubs can trade players against their will, which definitely will not happen.
No, they don't got enough
That just
money.
sounds like an asshole move. Um, JWS also wants to protect academies and says the father-son system should line up with the academy process. That actually makes a lot of sense to me. I think if you
Yeah.
have a father-son prospect in your academy team, you should be allowed to take them straight away because that kind of just makes sense as to how the system kind of
Mm.
flows. Um, they want a cost of living allowance for travel and stuff like that. Oh, well, actually, they want a cost of living allowance because it's expensive to live in Sydney.
Yeah.
Um, and then they're also open to purchasing picks and trading draft picks 2 years in advance. Hawthorn,
Again.
their dot points are very simple, and I like that they're actually in dot points. They're interested in greater player movement, including ability to trade draft picks 2 years ahead. I think most teams seem to be on agreement on that one. A view of the draft value index for academy and father-son picks, and they're very. This is ironic. They have a very serious concern about decreasing numbers of young Indigenous players.
Yeah, I mean,
And I
obviously
think there's a little bit of irony in that one.
I mean, there is, but I mean, they're right. Like,
No, yeah, they are
in
absolutely
terms of
correct.
pathways in the Northern Territory, even the higher parts of South Australia,
Yeah,
there's just not much.
from
It's
what-
not like scouts are going there or anything, so
Well, I mean, you look at the talent over the past couple of years. Well, let's say late 2010s to now. A lot of the talent that has come through from the northern states has been from families that are known.
yeah, exactly.
Like,
A lot of
Riolis,
them
for
are-
an example.
Yeah, well, I said the Riolis are technically WA now. I mean, obviously based in the Northern Territory.
Yeah, they're all from the Tiwi Islands, but a lot of them
Like they had to
also-
go to the Waffle to make a name for themselves. So
And then once their name was known, then they've, given greater pathways. Like Daniel Rioli, for an example, came down to Melbourne to study and managed to become a key footballer, stuff like that. But yeah, I agree. I would love to see more Indigenous players in the AFL.
yeah, and especially if they're making a team in the Northern Territory, it makes sense. Maybe proactively start an academy up there. Yeah, I don't know.
Melbourne's points are also pretty simple. They technically did decline to comment, but as far as we're aware, they want more information about how the academy system works and maybe change it. They're also interested about more player movement and the national reserves competition. So more things that most teams are in agreement with. North Melbourne, this is a big one. They believe that clubs should have more control as to what they can do in terms of list management. Again, mid-season trade period, picks in advance. They also want the AFL to abolish mandatory list sizes. They're meaning, well, not technically abolish. They still believe that there should be a maximum list size.
Maximum, but no minimum.
But yeah, no minimum, and which could end up messing a team over. Like, for example, with us, if we had the bare minimum of players and still had all of our injuries, we wouldn't have a team.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, like a lot of this is like, it gives list managers more flexibility, but honestly, more flexibility for list managers is sometimes a bad thing.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like there's some NFL teams like
here's the
that
caveat.
have just gone in purgatory.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the caveat.
Purely,
therefore, clubs can decide whether to have more players or pay less players more.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that could end up just becoming a massive issue in terms of salary cap.
Yeah, and especially in terms of the league, you know what I mean? It's like you see players in some clubs getting paid a lot more, and then you think you're owed more, and it leads to a snowballing effect. And while I'm not against AFL players getting paid more, as I said, yeah, I don't trust list managers.
No, neither do I. They appreciate what the AFL has done in terms of rookie list allowances and benefits to the VFL and development program through that. They believe that the father-son academy and NGA system should stay. They also believe that if you're father-son eligible, you shouldn't be NGA eligible. I kind of get that because you're probably going to go for as a father-son pick anyway. The Roos are strong on the need for clubs to pay market value. They're also very much interested in national reserves, but not as strong on it as other clubs. That's probably because of just their poor form at the moment. Probably doesn't help at all. Like if they were to play a reserves competition, they'd probably get smashed.
Mm.
Port Adelaide,
Mm.
they want the national reserves competition very, very
Yeah,
badly,
which is like weirdly ironic considering that
considering their
their whole
history in the
foundation
Sandful. Yeah.
is of yeah. But man, I can understand
They
why.
believe that clubs should be forced to pay more for academy and father-son talent. They're open to the idea of a mid-season trade period, but want more information on how it would be structured. And they're very much against priority picks and assistance packages.
It does come off as a bit of I think there's a lot with the interstate clubs as well. Like I know Gold Coast have gotten a few, but I think there tends to be like a bit of whisper in the ear sort of things. And it's not like directly, but you know, with a lot of media write-ups and all that, you know, like Port were in pretty dire straits.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much, you know, they got bailed out financially a bit by the AFL, but it was with like a lot of conditions and how they were running the club, and they're forced to pay a bit of it back, I think. Um, but yeah, as I said, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of, you know, um, where was ours when we were struggling sort of thing with that statement.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Richmond, their biggest issue is about the Indigenous system and how it is really, really bad at the moment. Apparently they warned the league about this in 2020, which
Yeah,
I'm not surprised about. Richmond has always been a massive proponent in Indigenous culture. Like we have multiple systems in
yeah,
place at Richmond. Like we've got the Morris Rioli Foundation, I think. I can't remember how to pronounce it, but we have like a couple of Indigenous systems. We've also got the Bashahuli Foundation out there, which
yeah.
deals with Middle Easterns and their development path, either into the AFL or into AFL related
Mm.
careers. Um, Richmond are
And
also
just
in.
Brendan Gale.
Yeah,
I was going to say,
it's a
tends to
lot
be
of
a
a. He's been very, very good at being a massive proponent for it, and I'm sure he'll do the same thing when he goes to Tassie.
Yeah.
Richmond are in favor of trading picks 4 years in advance, but they like the idea of
Yeah.
having conditional draft picks based on how many games a footballer plays after he gets selected. Which means I
Yeah.
think if they don't play enough games within
Yeah.
like the first two
Again, similar
years,
to the
maybe.
NFL, if they don't reach a threshold, they get actual a compensation back.
Yeah,
Normally, it means like one of their round compensation. They give up a round less normally. But yeah, as I said, it's one of those things where it's not quite as complicated as something like the NBA, where you're like trading futures with conditionals to where you end up on the ladder.
hmm
But yeah, as I said, it makes everything a bit more complicated.
The Tigers are in favor of the mid-season trade period and even raise the possibility of players ticking a box when they sign contracts, which would allow them to be traded mid-year. And the caveat of that is that they would increase the salaries of said players who tick the box, which I do like the idea of that. It means that that contract would probably, get transferred over, and the club that takes that player would have to pay off the rest of that contract, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like good and bad. I mean,
The
it
whole
would
the whole idea
arbitrarily,
of a mid-season trade period is good and bad. Like,
yeah, I think I would have that, but I would definitely restrict it to players over a certain age group as well, because yeah, as I
I
said, I
don't know.
think
We've
young
seen
kids.
some players that are like over 30 that have had a bigger impact at a second club.
No, I know, like I said, I think that would be good for some. Like, you know, as I said, if you're rebuilding, you know, you've got a player that's just not getting a game, like, you know,
And you could go to
that could
another
be
club and be
useful.
like a leadership player.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know if increasing the salary is like a good or bad idea, but as I said, I think there just needs to be some restriction, but I'm not really for mid-year trades. I think a lot of the planning for AFL is done in the preseason, and I like that it's a bit of an endurance game. But is the endurance game fair? You look at Richmond and you say no. It's awfully brutal at times. So I see why they want it at this year.
Speaking of a bit of brutality, St Kilda, they firmly believe flags are being won and lost due to the inequity of the entire system. Which means and you look at how St Kilda has had to kind of try and structure their list over the past few years, and that's with a lot of trades, not that many draft pick options.
Yeah, as I said, there's two teams, not historically North Melbourne, that have been like I guess maybe the Western Bulldogs, but Western Bulldogs, St Kilda, North Melbourne have been like the butt of the Melbourne teams. Like, I go on a bit about Vic Bias. I'm semi-joking, but like, there's definitely like a bit of separation between some of the Victorian clubs.
Absolutely.
And some of the
it's fairly obvious when you look at it overall.
Yeah.
St Kilda asked for the AFL to be firmer when it comes to assessing father, son, and academy talent. They want clubs to have to pay fair market price for talented players already linked to clubs, with a potential cap on how many a team can pick in the first round of the draft. That makes sense. Especially, we'll take the Gold Coast Academy picks over the recent draft period, for example, because they took, all of their players in the first round, I think?
Yeah, nearly.
So there's a very big point in that one. I kind of agree with them on that. Sydney.
Yeah, I think it was 3 or 4.
Yes. I think you're not far off on that one. Sydney, like GDRS, they want to protect the academy system, and they want the father-son pathway to line up with the academy system. Okay, this is interesting. The Swans say that they bring through more than 750 players per year in their academy, and 85% of those kids are aged between 11 and 15. But across the 15 years of having an academy, they say they've only selected 14 or 15 players from as north as Coffs Harbour all the way down to Wollongong. Which is actually pretty interesting, because that tells us that a lot of their talent goes to the other clubs.
Yeah.
And some of that might have come through, like, for when West Coast were having their issues, like, over the past couple of years. For example, there are other teams that probably would have picked them, probably a lot of Victorian-based, I would assume. But yeah, that's very interesting numbers, actually. Sydney is very strong on cost of living issues, because it's very expensive to live in Sydney. Everyone knows this.
Yeah.
Just don't live in Sydney, forehead. The Swans like the idea of a national reserves competition and would be in favour of the league introducing a rule whereby any top-up players must be aged 23 or under. I don't know why. Surely you would just accept a player.
I think it's so that they don't pinch good players from like the waffle and all that. I assume it's just to keep the blood okay between,
Yeah, I would assume so.
State leagues and
I would assume it's more like keeping the healthiness of this between like a tier 2 and a tier 3 competition, that sort of thing.
And also you don't want to actually like metagame it, like where you don't want the sub league to be like, oh, we need X amount of players, from, just to win these, to make them look better or something. You know what I mean? Like, they want it just to be kids having a run,
Sydney's president, Andrew
a representative of their actual B teams.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sydney's president has openly declared there should be a best of 3 grand final series. Nope, I am firmly against it. The one and done. Moving on.
Yeah.
West Coast Eagles. They have a big list on this one, so I'll try and get through it really quick. They have asked the question around the draft and whether the AFL can assure access to talent is as uncompromised as it can be, which relates to like the equalization of the whole process. Last year, the Eagles finished 18th, and its second draft selection was pick 30 due to academy compensation assistance package and father sons. So I completely get their point of view of how unfair the system is. Like, all they got was Harley Reid, and then that was it for a while. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, and they need depth.
Yeah. The club is open to, the national reserves, unlike Freo, purely because the waffle, despite still being kind of important to them, it's about getting better development into young players, especially having more access to better competition.
Yeah,
which is why
Eagles, of course.
teams like GWS and Gold Coast joined the VFL, because it's better competition for their young talent.
But also, Fremantle had the advantage of taking an already established club like Peel, whereas West Coast was just like a thrown together sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree. The fixturing remains their top priority though, and especially do want compensation for travel. They want Perth and Optus Stadium to be a signature event location, a la Dreamtime at Optus and the 2021 Grand Final during the pandemic. So they definitely swing more towards the idea of like a second opening round or like a hosting gather round and things like that. The club is aware of the stress of its football department staff, and they're definitely interested in replenishing finances in the soft cap to a pre-pandemic level. They believe that it's kind of spiked and become an issue post-pandemic, which makes a lot of sense. It believes losing good people and not attracting great ex-players is the real problem because of the current soft cap. Fair enough. The Eagles are fairly neutral on a mid-season trade period. They're open to a discussion, but they don't want the strong getting stronger via that, which makes a lot of sense. And provided it doesn't make the system too complex, they're interested in trading future draft picks years in advance. And finally, the Western Bulldogs. They're definitely focusing primarily on the fixture issues. They weren't a fan of how complicated opening round made the rest of the season appear, especially when they do not have a bye until round 15, whereas Sydney gets 2 byes before round 12.
Yeah,
which we talked about that last week,
season.
and how much of a problem
Bulldogs
that is.
started the season a week later rather than having a refresh week.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
They acknowledge that the fixture will never truly be equal, and that, that I think every team kind of has accepted that, because it's, there's only 2 teams per state, and then everyone else is in Victoria, which is more central location. But that's besides the point. That's a history thing. But currently it has gone too far the other way, and the introduction of Tasmania will make it even more messier because it's an uneven amount of teams.
Yeah.
The Dogs are also strong on list management issues and are keen for the AFL to put down a long-term strategy on academies, mid-season trading, and the concessions for Tasmania and the sciences.
Yeah, because I wanted the AFL to be a bit more proactive, and probably discuss it a bit further than, because it was very
what
everyone
is expecting. Yeah, and the same thing for GWS as well. But I guess what everyone is expecting is exactly what happened to them. Is that over the next 2 to 3 years? Well, I don't think this upcoming draft period and the next one, but the ones after that will be when. Actually, no. I think this draft period is going to be the last draft period that the teams will get a decent hand in, and the ones coming up are all just going to be for Tassie for the most part, to try and build their team. And I think that's where the teams are going to be fairly underappreciated, very excluded from the process, because there's a fair chance all of the top 10 picks are just going to go straight to Tasmania. and it's not something that's very very good for the health of the competition.
No, for sure.
So for overall, teams primarily want draft pick movements. Most are in favor of mid-season competition, and the biggest issues are Indigenous players not coming into the system and fixture issues, especially for interstate teams. So that will do it. I wasn't expecting that to go as long as it did. I apologize, but
It's all right.
we after this round, things are going to start to quiet down because we have only we'll have only 6 games to cover going into the next couple of weeks, which means we'll probably have a little bit more time. Either the podcast episodes will get shorter, or we'll have more time to talk about some more interesting stuff like this. I just wanted to get this out of the way because this came out last week. So I want to thank you all so much for coming and hang out with us. I made a video. I did a stream the other day, and I made a video on everything that I got in Canada. I will get that uploaded probably sometime this week, and I might put it on this channel just because more people will see it, and I think you all will be interested. I hope you all are definitely interested in seeing what I got. It's okay if not. I'm not expecting like too much interaction with it. I just want to share with you all some of the things that I got. Next week will be probably a big episode because of how many games we're covering. It's pretty much just a normal round. So probably another long episode, but definitely a lot more interesting games than there was this week. A lot of big clashes. We're looking forward to going through it. So until then, thank you all so much again. Please go check out the socials down below, and we will see you all next week. Goodbye.